What's up, everybody? Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert. I have a special treat and a special guest, and I'm not going to waste any more time. Paul, welcome back to MythVision.
Thanks. It's been a while.
It has. I have to lay out the red carpet, man, because we have done some videos together. Some of them, 500,000, 700,000. I mean, we've had some pretty clear bangers that have gone out there and massive amounts of views. So I want to just give credit where credit's due and just say, if you think MythVision has some really good stuff, and we do, you need to go subscribe to Paul, the Inquisitive Bible Reader. It is a sin right now that the world is committing that there's not over 100,000 subscribers right now on his channel. This is the unforgivable sin. There's only one way, actually, I'll say you can be forgiven, and that's breaking the 100,000, because your work, man, like, it inspires me. You inspire me. You are very careful, meticulous, and I don't know if that's the OCD or if that's just you.
That's way too kind of you, Derek.
Well, I mean it. I came across your work years back. Look, here's some of the collaborations, actually. I'm thankful you did it. This isn't even all of them.
No, we've done a bunch more.
Okay, there you go. Gods. Yeah, we've done several. The real Anunnaki. I mean, my goodness, we've done so many. That one was fun. That was a blast. So anyway, subscribe to the Inquisitive Bible Reader. His website's in the description. isthatinthebible.wordpress.com. And you have all sorts of deep dives in here. I think what put you on my map was the Greek connections, or looking at Greek parallels, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was how you got in touch.
Absolutely. I came across your blog before I came across your channel. But once I did, I was like, I got to talk to this guy. Good to see everyone in the chat. This should be fun. Absolutely. Epic intro. Just made it. S-Mill in the house. 40,000-year-old writing. Salutations. Good to see everybody. Everybody take the time and go and subscribe to Paul's channel. And then have a nice night. Thanks, Paul. Have a good one, man.
The end.
The end. So you recently, actually, you helped me also with thinking through how to approach the debate that I was doing on dating Luke-Acts as well. And then your latest YouTube video, these are the two latest things. Your latest YouTube video is talking about the two trees of Eden. So I just want people to know that me and Paul are close buddies, and he shares with me all sorts of insights. He helps me with a lot of the thinking. He knows scholarship I don't know. Paul, tell us a little bit about this two trees thing. And we could just freestyle and go into different topics along the way.
Yeah, well, Genesis and the Garden of Eden is a topic I keep coming back to because there's so much to look at there, and there's always something new, right? And this time I just wanted to look at the two trees because I was previously looking at a lot of iconography for a previous video. And these sacred trees, they appear everywhere in Mesopotamia, Israel, Ugarit, Egypt, for thousands and thousands of years. And then most modern people, of course, know the Eden story, but not all this iconography and myth that lies behind it. And when we learn that story in Sunday school or whatever, we get that one specific interpretation of it. But we all understand, I think, intuitively some of the issues with it. Like if the tree of knowledge gives Adam and Eve their first taste of knowing what is good and evil, then how can you blame them for the sin of eating the tree in the first place, right? That's kind of the obvious one.
Exactly. Yeah, we love that one, don't we? It was like, hold on. The other one is like, this isn't the tree itself, but it's like, how's he allowing this snake, the deceiver? Because we're coming at it.
How did the snake get in there?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the fact that they don't die right away, even though that was the promise or the threat, which then gets interpreted as, well, they became mortal. Except, if you read closely, it seems like they were mortal the whole time, right? when Adam is created from the dust, you're told that humans will return to dust, right? There's no hint of any kind of special immortality status. So I just wanted to see what the latest scholarship says about the trees and see if I could make any conclusions.
Well, you got my mind spinning.
Yeah, I mean, I never know where the video is going to end up when I start doing the research.
Yeah, let me post that. Let me share that specific video. I mean, it's on the channel. I'm asking everybody to go subscribe to. But just to save some people the trouble who might be in the chat, let me share the exact video so they can actually check it out for themselves. So one of the things that came to mind was, well, there's a lot of things that came to mind when you did your video. And I think it's because I've read a lot of these myself and I thought, man, you're connecting dots and there's so much. You and I did an Asherah video as well, where we were connecting like this sacred tree, which the goddess is plural. It seems goddesses often are symbolic as trees. And I noticed a lot of the examples you gave in the video. I might as well just not play it, but fast forward because I want everyone to go give you watch time.
Sure.
And I'm not cheating the system here to try and, because the more you watch it, ladies and gentlemen, the more he's going to get more view. Like YouTube's going to promote this. So please help promote it. Right. You do have, obviously, I'm just skipping here. You do have obviously sacred trees. You do have Osiris. All right. You talk about that, which is this part, right?
Yeah.
That looks, the bottom part seems to be symbolic of the female genitalia.
Yeah.
And the fertility, obviously, with the reproduction that comes with female reproductive systems that we don't have, obviously. I find it really fascinating how the tree symbolizes the female. And then you draw this line in the video you did with me to the menorah. And the tree it's still vestigial of the old Asherah kind of symbolism.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, you see some of those inscriptions on jars from ancient Judah, and you've got this tree with the curving 7 branches. It looks exactly like a menorah. And then, of course, the menorah is described as having, you know, the almond buds and everything, and which is just, it's a tree.
Yeah, and you connected that to Aaron's rod as well that has the budding in the Ark of the Covenant. And I'm like, oh my, look, we did some connecting, okay? And it's it really is all connected. The other thing you brought up in this video is how sex may be related to the tree. We got a super chat. Super chats interrupt us, and then we come right back to them. Sorry. Steve M. 1984, bless you, my friend, for the super chat. I used to think the serpent was the hero of the Genesis story. But if he had just sent Eve to the tree of life first, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Yeah, well, that's another great point, right? Like, was it just sheer coincidence that they ate from the trees in the wrong order?
Right.
But then you can also ask, do they even know the tree of life exists? Because the narrator tells us about it, but God doesn't tell Adam about it.
That was what piqued my curiosity about this video. I'm going to drop the super chat just because. Is there a way to tilt your camera a little more? Because I want to be able to see you while we get super chats. Sorry to bug you.
I know, I'll try, but it's not very adjustable.
It's not very, okay. A little bit better. Here, I'm going to hide it. No offense to super chatters. I just want to make sure that we can see our friend here. The one thing you said in this video that I found was like, whoa, is dealing with the tree. Where is it?
Yeah.
What is it? What's going on here? Where is it located? Is it two in the same? Is it different? Why does it show up at the end? It's not mentioned. And I think, you know, we want to be careful and pick this story apart and be, you know, honest and say, maybe there's redactional layers. I mean, how do you explain this? But the other thing is it feels like after watching your video, I kind of want to sit back and go, are we taking this shit too literal? Like, is it just like,
yeah,
are there not like plot holes? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think you have to stop taking it so literally if you want it to make sense, even though that seems like a paradox. Because they're symbols. Not every element is going to fit together like a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
They're more just conceptual connections that you have to put together.
Yeah, you did a really fine job of showing that And then the final scene, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, made me laugh. So everyone has to go check it out. I feel like playing one spot, if you don't mind,
Sure.
of the video I made not long ago, which I really wish more people would have had eyes on, just because I did go deep in the weeds. Not bad. 67,000. For me, what I was getting used to, beggars can't be choosers kind of thing. But I was, a video like this that I spent is an hour and 6 minutes. I put some time into this. They used to get 500,000. These self-productive, extremely deep dive type videos that I would make, you said, at least 150, 200,000 views. And YouTube kind of sucked at this one, I guess you'd say. Let me back this up here. So we talk about, let's go a little further back. Let's go a little bit back here. So I'm going to start right here. Let me know if you can hear me, hear it.
Twisting the earlier.
Hold
Yeah,
on.
it's quite loud.
Let me lower this here. Bear with me. I need to have the internal mic come through my headset, so it's not all right. Now I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit because people who are deaf like me. There you go.
Positive motifs from Mesopotamia into negative ones. Scholars today view the famous Adam and Eve sill as part of a broader Mesopotamian tradition of images and stories that celebrate life, fertility, and divine communion, rather than a one-to-one portrait of a lost Eden myth. For example, in Inanna and the Halupu tree, circa 2100 BCE, the goddess plants a sacred tree that a serpent coils around until Gilgamesh clears it so she can craft throne and bed from its wood. In the Sumerian hymn Inanna and Utu contains an etiological myth describing how Inanna became the goddess of sex. At the beginning of the hymn, Inanna knows nothing of sex, so she begs her brother Utu to take her to Ker. Ker is the Sumerian underworld, so that she may taste the fruit of a tree that grows there, which will reveal to her all the secrets of sex. Utu complies, and in Ker, the underworld, Inanna tastes the tree or the fruit and becomes knowledgeable. The hymn employs the same motif found in the myth of Enki and Ninhursag, and in the later biblical story of Adam and Eve. Notice on the sill, it's depicting a male deity on the right.
So, okay, I'm getting into the interpretation of the sill now, but I wanted to show that one scene just to show that there's an ancient Sumerian story that has fertility, knowledge, and then sex kind of blending in a very ancient Sumerian story. And when you're explaining John Day, when you're explaining, Otho, is it Otho? Is that how you pronounce it?
Eckhart Otto?
Otto.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the other scholars, you're showing like they are touching different aspects of something. And it's not even that they have to contradict necessarily. They might on some points, but like often it seems like they're overlapped in a lot of ways somehow.
Yeah, and that's kind of the challenge of researching this. Is every scholar kind of has their own spin on it, and you can debunk every proposal about what these trees mean with other elements of the story. So it's hard to come to a consensus.
Another super duper in the house. Bakken, thank you so much for the super chat. The tree of life of the goddess is cannabis. Seven-headed reed in Joseph's dream. Jeremiah says cannabis and goddess worship were idolatry. Jeremiah 44 and Genesis 3 are related. Goddess reduced to tree, herb of wisdom. So so Bakken, thank you so much for the super chat. What is your takeaway? And I'm going to hide it so we can see your face here, Paul. What's your takeaway on the tree? It never says what kind of tree it is, but what's your digging into this? What's your hunch?
Yeah, so the sacred tree iconography tends to combine different species, right? Often there's a date palm, sycamores, cedars, a few other kinds. In the biblical context, it seems that Asherah was mostly associated with maybe the almond tree, which I guess blooms in the spring in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the few fruit trees that are actually found in Israel. You've only got a few. You've got that and olives and pomegranates. But pomegranate trees, of course, are another option because pomegranates are widely used as a decorative motif in ancient Near Eastern seals in temples, and of course in the Jerusalem temple as well. I think there are pomegranate decorations.
It's strange. When I was in Sepphoris, when we were over there, there were actual literal pomegranate trees. And what's really odd about that is I love pomegranates.
Yeah,
Every
me too.
season, every year, I'll
They're
cut them
good.
open. My goodness, I'll make a bowl, get all the seed, the
Yeah,
red
yeah.
juices,
Just eat them with a spoon.
just sit, man, till my stomach hurts. And I've never seen them on an actual tree, like growing. I'm in
Okay.
Israel. I'm literally in the land right there near Galilee, in Sepphoris, and I'm walking next to there's a mosaic with like there's a zodiac mosaic on the bottom of a synagogue, and right next to it are lots of pomegranates. And I thought, whoa. Obviously some Jewish interpretations of the laws of, there's so many seeds that are the
Yeah,
laws in
yeah.
the pomegranate and all that. But I do want to address the super chat here, and that is, what do we do, or what do you do? Have you done any research on the idea of cannabis? Because they have found residue of cannabis in priest settings, I believe, on the altar in one of the locations, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
around this region.
What's that place called? One of the other sanctuaries in southern Judah had residue of some kind of incense that I think contained cannabis.
So they're trying to meet God for real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about incense, but I'm sure that creating that thick smoke that smells good and maybe gives you a bit of a buzz is part of the holy experience, right? Doesn't it say in 2 Kings that Yahweh has chosen to dwell in a dense cloud in the temple rather than up in the sky?
Interesting. So that if we approached, because some people I think go too far. Okay, some people, in my opinion, I mean, we all
Yeah.
have opinions, right?
Yeah.
Some people are looking for everything to mean like Amanita muscaria mushrooms, like everything is a mushroom or everything is a
Yeah,
but
every vision is a drug hallucination, right?
yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to rule out that there is some of this. Like, and I think not Bakken. Bakken knows me and has been watching, but there's some people who do really take this so far. They don't like me because I'm much more skeptical and cautious on drawing like absolute comparisons and jumping to those conclusions. But I also do think that there is real legitimate reasons from personal experience on like how this could send you into that kind of state of mind.
Yeah, I just don't know a lot about that topic, and I think without archaeological evidence, it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
And we just don't have texts that tell us how these religions worked and what people were doing back then, right? Even though we've got all this iconography, we just don't know what most of it means for sure because there's no captions explaining what it means. Just the people who made it knew, and they assumed everyone else knew.
Yeah, that's interesting. I kind of wonder how common was cannabis at that time. That'd be something worth studying because
yeah, I have no idea. There must be someone who knows.
Yeah, I imagine if it wasn't grown there, it would have been exported or something. But who knows? It'd be cool to know if they knew. Bakken's back again. Says
Telerad, that's right.
Yeah, cannabis for Asherah, frankincense for Yahweh. They were getting stoned, bro. They were getting stoned. Thank you so much, Bakken, for that super chat. So Paul, what else would you say in this video that you did? Because it sounds like you got another Pandora video coming sometime in the future.
Well, sometime, I don't know.
You don't know. That was just like a little, like, hey, if I want to explore this, I can.
Yeah, that's one of many ideas I have in the background.
Then what's the next video then? Because I know you have to have something.
Well, I need to get back to probably the New Testament. I like exploring the synoptic problem, so I'm going to choose something related to that. I haven't
Okay.
totally decided though.
All right, I'm gonna ask you the tough one then, man.
Okay.
So everybody in the chat, I want to see what they say, and well, no, I want you to say, and then I'm going to get them to vote. Do you think Q existed, or are you a Farah guy?
I am neither. I am partial to Mythian posteriority.
Okay,
Although I'm still making up my mind. I tend not to think that Q existed.
interesting. You're a heretic for that. You know that, right?
I know. It's a fringe position.
No, I know. It's I have a lot of scholarly friends who, obviously fall on both sides. And I'll tell you, I've done interviews with these academics. I'm not going to name any names. I'm just going to say I've done interviews with two in the flesh, one on each side of me. And one was literally challenging the other one who held the Q. And you can tell they put so much time and years, and like it's such a
Yeah.
it got so heated that I had to go, gentlemen, let's calm down. Like, it got really, really bad. The disputes, I had to calm them down, but they've spent like decades defending these views, right? So what do you do? So let's talk a little New Testament then. I mean, anyone who wants to throw some questions, comments at us, feel free to take us wherever you want. Challenge us. We don't care. But I recently did a debate on Luke-Acts, dating it past 93 AD. And the opponent took the position that it was pre-70. And I knew I was biting off more than I could chew, but I was going to do the best I could as far as in a debate setting to try and perform that kind of deed when I'd say 90%, 95% of people probably have never read Antiquities 18 through 20 in depth or studied the history behind and the characters and all that goes into it. But what would you say your walk away is? You didn't watch the debate, but I'm saying your walk away on this whole issue of dating Luke-Acts. Are you 100% convinced in your mind that it's late?
Yeah, well, it seems undeniable that the Book of Acts uses Josephus's Antiquities. And definitely the consensus seems to be shifting towards some kind of dating in the early 2nd century, especially ever since the Acts report came out a few years ago. So yeah, that makes good sense to me. There's a lot of less decisive facts that also seem to point in that direction, right? Like the pure obscurity of Acts, which is basically never mentioned by any datable source until Irenaeus around 180, 185. So even early patristic authors like Justin Martyr that seem to know content from the Gospels or from Paul's epistles don't seem to know anything about Acts.
That's a big, I didn't take this approach where I was going to try and kind of say, what's the earliest we could possibly date it in my mind? Because I think it knows Josephus would have been 95. And I mean, I'm really bending it because I'm saying like, that's at least giving 2 years after he published his work for someone to have read it or known it or heard it. And that's it.
Yeah. And I think in general, if you're going to do that, you almost want 5 to 10 years between the time a text is published, right? Because it's not like Josephus appears in bookstores around the Roman Empire the moment he publishes it, right? You've got to have people hand copying it and, sending it to, I mean, there were booksellers, I guess, but it was a time-consuming process.
Yeah. And so I took that earliest point, but your point is that we can safely be certain that it exists by 180 when Irenaeus mentions it.
So that's the terminus ad quem or whatever. Right.
And I ultimately went and tried to make it the earliest I could get it, which was, 95-ish. But I would say it's safe in the early 2nd century for sure. But I wanted to be strong in that. And anyway, you did a little digging into that. Let's talk a little bit about the New Testament. Let's talk a little about Luke-Acts and stuff like that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What are you right now most interested in pertaining to the New Testament?
Yeah, my 2 main interests, I think, are the synoptic problem, because it's this endless puzzle where every single passage in the Gospels offers some new hint, but the final solution still seems out of grasp.
Hmm.
And then I really like the Book of Acts. Some scholars said Acts is Luke is a bad historian but an excellent storyteller, and I like to keep that in mind as I read it.
Luke is an excellent. You said
Luke is a poor historian but an excellent storyteller.
How come we hear the opposite? How come we always hear that he's this amazing historian? Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I think there's this anxiety that without Acts, we just don't know what happened in early Christianity, right? And yeah, if we can treat that as an early source, as an eyewitness source, as a collection of stories that really happened, then it solves, a lot of the mystery. But if it's a second century sort of legend building exercise, like the other Acts of the Apostles, right? Because you've got the Acts of Paul and the Acts of Thomas and the Acts of Peter and so on. If it belongs more in that category, then whatever was going on in first century Christianity is still kind of a mystery, and we just may never completely know how it started, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's some anxiety there. Of course, there's also, the usual fundamentalist. A lot of people need the whole Bible to be inerrant, so a late dating of Acts is just out of the question.
Yeah, it's problematic. I want to return back to that, but I don't want to leave anybody super chatting hanging here. Bakken asks to read the Jeremiah passage, so I pulled it up, and I got the NRSV UE, I believe it is. Let's pull this up. Let's read. What is the exact location in this section here, Bakken? Because it's a good chunk. Let me look and see in the chat. So what is the exact passage? I'll be waiting for your answer while I look the best I can.
I'll look it up too, but I'm not quite sure what he's referring to.
Yeah. Here it is. I think 17 maybe. Instead, we will do everything that we have vowed, make offerings to Queen of Heaven and pour out libations to her. But as we and our ancestors, our kings and our officials used to do in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, we used to have plenty of food and prospered and saw no misfortune. Let's see. But from the time we stopped making offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out libations to her, we lacked everything and have perished by the sword of the is it
verse 19? We made cakes for her.
Yeah. Is that brownies? Cannabis brownies?
Birthday cakes for Inanna. I don't know.
Okay, I'm checking you out, Bakken. I haven't seen anything yet, my friend. Trying to look for it. It is because you have burnt offerings. I don't see pour out libations to her. And then they smoked marijuana. No, I'm kidding. I don't see it. All right, I'm going to come back to you, Bakken, here in just a minute. I want to hit this next one while we see if you can't come up with the exact location. Reconstructed Bible, thank you for the super chat. Are you using AI in your research or content creation? And if so, what are you using and how are you using it?
I have tried. I try using it for difficult questions I can't answer, and it usually hallucinates the wrong answer anyway. So many times I've asked it, what tablet is this certain story found in, or what is the the museum number for this tablet, so I can go look it up, and it'll just make up an answer that is completely incorrect. It'll tell me, oh, it's British Museum, blah blah blah, and then I'll go look and it doesn't exist. But I do find it useful for reading cuneiform. If I need to know what some cuneiform says, I'll ask Gemini. Sometimes it knows, sometimes it gets the answer wrong, but it gives me a place to start researching. Because when I'm making these videos, all that often you need to find a certain tablet or a certain spot in a tablet where the cuneiform says something particular, and I like to check to make sure it's actually there, and I like to use it in my graphics just for fun.
Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously I use it for visuals, no doubt. sometimes I use it as like a shortcut when I'm trying to find out, hey, who are a few scholars that actually argue this idea, and in what publications do they make those arguments? And then I'll go hunt down the sources, so it helps me make the shortcut. Then sometimes I'll write a sentence out, and I'm not a writer like you, Paul, so my writing isn't always as eloquent or as clean and simple and precise. So I might ask it to polish up my scripts to make it clean, make it simple, make it precise, easy for people to understand. And I also, the way I think and speak just naturally can be repetitive, and I don't mean to be. People go, you said that already, like, and I don't mean to, but maybe it's from managing for 4 years. And like when you do management, you have to repeat the same things every day, doing the same things, the same people.
I think all writers have that problem. Whenever I read my own scripts over, I have to make all those edits because I'm like, oh man, I used the word multivalent 5 times here. I gotta stop doing that.
Multivalent. That's the word you used in the recent one.
I know.
Yeah. So I think it's important. I am thankful that AI is getting better, because that's going to give everyone access to good scholarship at the tip of their fingers. But I remember when it first came out, and like you said, it's hallucinating museum stuff. Dude, I'm like, hey, give me the quote from Justin Martyr. I know it's there, but I may not know exactly where off the top of my head or whatever. So I'll like ask it for something, which that's a terrible example, but it might be something from Clement. It might be some obscure thing, or I'm looking for something that shows me Greek or Roman sources, and it'll tell me the source, and I'll go look up the source. And it's not just that it's like not in the right location. Sometimes it invents whole cloth.
Yeah. No,
the entire idea. And I'm like, hold on, you're saying that,
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Like Osiris. So me and Neil were looking one day, we're like, okay, Horus, Osiris, Isis, we're looking for a resurrection story that was supposedly in Plutarch, that was supposed to give like a bodily resurrection, but like in this world. Okay. It was supposed to be like a groundbreaker, because Egyptologists will point out he resurrects. He has full bodily function, but he's in the underworld. Well, we thought we found a source that was going to say, hey, he might be in this world. And we went to Plutarch. We're digging in. We're like, where the hell is this? They made it up. So
yeah,
you can use it, but you have to check your sources. Like if you wanted to write like a nice clean paragraph or translate in, language, it's probably going to be pretty good, because that's what it's really good at. But it can make up quotes, all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Well, like for fun, I always have a movie or TV clip at the end of my videos, right? That's related to the topic, and those are hard to find sometimes. So I'll ask an AI, like, what movies feature this biblical theme or whatever. But even there, it'll make up a movie, or it'll make up a scene that doesn't exist in a movie, and then I'll go to the trouble of downloading the movie, and it's just not there. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. You always have a way with movies when you're editing the videos that I've like worked with you on. You have like great clips that you grab from old classics. I loved.
Yeah, that's just, you want to have something that you do that no one else does. So that's my little quirk.
Absolutely. So Bakken says Jeremiah 44 and Genesis 3 are the same story. So let's see. Yeah, maybe we have to read it then, I guess, because I imagine the word that came to Jeremiah. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to read it?
Go ahead.
Okay, let me take Bakken back down here. And we do have a super chat coming in. Bear with me, my friend. We'll get to it. The word that came to Jeremiah for all the Judeans living in the land of Egypt at Middal and Tapenhes, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, at Memphis, and the land of Pathros. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel: you yourself have seen all the disaster that I have brought on Jerusalem and on all the towns of Judah. Look at them. Today they are a desolation without an inhabitant in them, because of the wickedness that they committed, provoking me to anger, in that they went to make offerings to and serve other gods that they had not known, neither they nor you nor your ancestors. Yet I persistently sent to you all my servants the prophets, saying, I beg you not to do this abominable thing that I hate. But they did not listen or incline their ear to turn from their wickedness and make no offerings to other gods. So my wrath and my anger were poured out and kindled in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, and they became a waste and a desolation, as they still are today. And now Yeah.
Can I interrupt you there?
Yep.
Well, just one thought. I know there's one interpretation of the Eden story which says that it's an allegory for the destruction of Jerusalem and the loss of the Jerusalem temple, right? Especially if you consider that the temple was decorated with this motif of cherubim and sacred trees, then it could be like the temple is equivalent to the garden, and the temple getting ransacked and the priests getting evicted is like Adam getting evicted from the Garden of Eden. I know Francesca Stavrokopoulou specifically holds to that interpretation.
So repeat it one more time.
Well, the idea is that the Garden of Eden story is not about original sin. It's an allegory for the destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon. And then because all these elements in Eden, like the trees and the cherubim, have exact parallels in the design of the temple, it's almost like the garden is the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And then the priesthood would be like Adam getting evicted.
Yeah,
so that's one way of looking at it.
I do have her book here.
I don't know if she says it in her book. She did a mini series with BBC years ago where she gave that theory.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is in her book though, because when I read it, yeah, I think this is in her book. I'd have to search and dig it up, but I would imagine I don't know, genitals sprouted. Yeah, this is it's all body parts, the way she describes this whole thing. So it's going to be very difficult to try and find it without having an E version to like Command F and search through. But Bakken followed up with just saying, Eve, thank you so much, Bakken. Eve offered the fruit, meaning she made offerings to the goddess and got her husband to join, that the sin is idolatry, exile is a punishment. So there's a symbolic kind of repetition.
Yeah, so that is then sort of the view that the Eden story is an allegory for Israel's idolatry and then the loss of Jerusalem and the temple.
Yeah, so you would agree with Francesca Bakken, which you're in good company, I think. I mean, she's awesome. It's really interesting to hear the different interpretations from these scholars.
Yeah.
So I guess I won't have to read this, but I do get what you're saying as far as that is concerned. And is that, reflected in kind of a origin myth that is much more symbolic than what we see that's more explicit about being in the temple and performing certain things and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so much there. Really, that is an interesting thing to see those patterns throughout the Bible. And that's probably why she thinks that, because she sees the patterns in other scriptures, including the temple and all of that.
Especially since so many Pentateuchal scholars now think that the whole thing was written, during the exile or afterwards, as a sort of reflection on why Israel lost its homeland, right?
Yeah. Interesting observation. Absolutely. Then Pit Monk super chatted. Thank you so much, Pit Monk. Who are, it's an interesting name. Who are people of Nod? Why didn't Cain know them?
Yeah, the land of Nod. I think that's one of those things that just no one knows about. Like, we don't know what Nod is supposed to be.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not mistaken about that. And of
double
course,
check.
And of course, Cain is the eponymous ancestor of the Kenites, right? Ancestor of the Kenites. So at one point, there must have been a whole body of traditions about Cain and the lands he settled, and the how he became, his lineage got into metallurgy and stuff.
That's an interesting one in and of itself.
Yeah.
I'm asking just to see critical. Have you seen looked up what the critical scholars might think about it?
About Nod?
Yeah. Like, has anyone possibly? I mean, I'm sure someone's made attempts.
I'll see if I can look it up in the.
Yeah, see what Bible we can. Please, just because it's interesting to think about. Obviously, background knowledge, and Dan McClellan did a few really good videos recently on this, showing the various traditions, the genealogies that don't agree. Both of them have a Cain. Both of them have, they're the same genealogies, but a little different, coming from different strains of the tradition. And this would explain why Cain feared for his life, because you're like, well, hold on. It's Adam, Eve, Cain and Abel, and that's it. There's no sisters. There's no brothers. There's nobody in the story, when you went to that last chapter, there in the beginning of that chapter, it acts like that's it. But then there's all these people to fear. So someone's patching stuff together.
Yeah, and quite a few scholars have shown that the flood seems to be kind of a late intrusion into the story. So there was an earlier version of the primeval history that had continuity, from Cain all the way up to, the Israelite patriarchs.
Interesting. Critical scholars usually do not think the people of Nod are known ethnic group in Genesis. The text never actually names a tribe or nation called the Nodites or the Nodites. It only says Cain settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Bible Odyssey notes that Nod is otherwise unknown and that its Hebrew etymology suggests something like homeless or aimless, place of wandering. So the most common critical reading is that Nod is a wordplay, not a real place name you could put on a map. Cain is cursed to be a wanderer. Then he goes to a place whose name basically means wandering. The Torah explicitly says the story is probably being ironic. Cain is told to wander, yet he settles in a land called wandering and even builds a city. More broadly, critical scholars tend to read Genesis 1 through 11 as primeval etiological literature. In other words, these chapters are explaining big human realities: mortality, exile, violence, city building, herding, music, metalwork, rather than giving a modern, tightly harmonized account of world population history. And then David Carr, for example, describes the primeval history as focusing on human mortality, family relations, and etiological explanations for later human life and institutions. So there's probably no people of Nod or land of Nod. It's just a funny wordplay.
I think that's
yeah. Thank you for that, Pit Monk. Next super chat, S Mill still in the house. Temples were fill-ins for mountains where Eden was.
Yeah, that's another connection. Like, I mean, Jerusalem itself is kind of like a little mountain, right? The mountain of Zion, the Acropolis. But sacred mountains feature throughout the Old Testament. Sinai, Horeb, Carmel,
Tabor.
Tabor.
And then we have like
Zaphon, of course. The mountain of Baal gets mentioned often.
And then up north, there's some more. I mean, mountains are a big deal.
Yeah, and of course, in Ezekiel, the Garden of Eden is quite explicitly on a mountain. In the Ugaritic literature, you have the Garden of El on his holy mountain. You got the mountain of the assembly in Isaiah 14.
You maybe want to pull the book down, Adam, Eve, and the Devil, just to show people again. I love that book. I was going to ask you too. You know which one I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. What was your takeaway? I mean, clearly you helped make the video and all that, but like, what was your takeaway from that whole thing? Do you think they're on to something?
I don't buy the whole thing. I do think the text is interesting about being about El's garden and the fact that a snake is able to infiltrate it and poison, I guess, the garden or poison someone. Of course, it's really fragmentary, so it's hard to read.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a perfect precursor to the Eden story, though, the way the authors do.
Right. I asked that of David Carr, what his thoughts were.
Yeah, I saw that. He didn't even know about the book.
What? But I do have
the authors.
I have an interview coming with, I haven't had it edited yet, by Shauna is it Delonsky? Yeah, Shauna Delonsky, who I asked, and I've asked several. I've asked Robert Cargill. I've asked like all sorts of scholars. None of them know about it. And then I asked Shauna Delonsky. She said, "I know this book." So I was like, "Ooh, I'd like to do an episode with you just to dive into the weeds of this." Because for those who don't know, Adam, Eve, and the Devil, we have a documentary that we produced, and in fact, you helped write this, where it ultimately is telling about a mountain, a garden on a mountain. The pantheon of the gods is up there, and the underworld deity Haranu comes up in the form of a serpent and like starts screwing with the garden. Like you
he
said,
doesn't come up in the form of a serpent.
oh, he
but
doesn't.
He's thought to maybe be connected to serpents or the deity of serpents.
Okay.
And
I
then
thought
there's
they were
this.
saying he transformed into it or something.
No,
But
I don't think that's in there. But
okay,
he takes the job when none of the other gods will help out, and then he
that's right.
finds some kind of tree of death that grows by the Tigris and uses it to cleanse the garden.
And then he gets. Isn't there a union with one of the goddesses on the mountain?
Oh yeah, there's like gosh, let me look it up. Yeah,
You know
there's
what I'm
like
talking
a
about?
bridal scene at the end.
Yeah. Like they go,
Yeah.
okay, you do this for us, and we'll let one of the goddesses marry you, and we'll create union with you in the underworld.
Yeah. So the text goes in a couple of weird directions, and it's hard to categorize and think genre-wise. The traditional explanation is that it's an incantation for snake bites,
Right.
but other scholars like these ones see it more as some kind of origin myth.
And you're torn between both in a way.
I think I lean the second way, but I don't think Haranu stands in for the snake and the devil the way the authors do.
Gotcha.
But we do know that Haranu was venerated in Israel because there's a city called Beth Horon, which means there would have been a temple to him there.
Another super chat by Bakken. Thank you so much, Bakken. Appreciate the super chat, my friend. The snake, a symbol of the goddess, woman cursed with pain, infertility, and subjected to man's authority. The fruit awakens the couple. Also, prostitution reference to Enkidu tamed. But Eve devolves Adam. Hold on. There's a lot here. So
I know, and you've got limited words to type it in, right?
yeah. Bakken's trying.
He's trying. So, there's definitely a link with Enkidu. I didn't cover it because it has nothing to do with the trees, but there is something with the way Enkidu is a first man, right? And he communes with the animals in the wild. And then once he learns what sex is, he gains the ability to speak language, and then the animals won't hang out with him anymore. So he has to leave the wilderness. And so obviously a lot of people see a parallel there with the way Adam and Eve have their awakening, and then the animals, and then they're sent out of the garden, which of course is filled with animals who were created to be Adam's companions in the first place. But it's like an allegory for civilization, right?
Yeah. So he says the snake, a symbol of the goddess, women cursed with pain and fertility, which I think that's why sex needs to be related to this somehow. I mean,
yeah,
clearly,
it is a strong theme.
It has to be. I mean, and again, with the whole Enkidu thing, you point out that his only companions were animals. Yeah. Then, Shamhat comes and says, check this out. And he's like, ooh. And then 7 days or 6 nights and 7 days or vice versa, he's doing the do. And then he tries to go back and he's changed. He's become a man.
Yeah.
Like
he's become too human. Yeah.
Yeah. And the animals are like, nah, get away with your cooties, your human cooties. That seems to happen with Adam when he had no companion. He only had animals, a helpmeet, and then, Eve comes. But then the super chat goes on to say, women cursed with pain, infertility, and subjected to man's authority. The fruit awakens the couple, so their eyes are opened. Do you find that idea of them eating and their eyes being opened anywhere else other than Eden?
I don't think so.
Not that language specifically, like then their eyes were opened up because they ate?
No, I mean, I can't think of anywhere else where eating some kind of food has like a physical effect on a person in that way.
Yeah, because the only thing I can think of is the reverse, to give you an example, but it's not, this is completely throwing spaghetti to say maybe there's an element to it. And it reminds me of, this is totally probably just vague, but when Gilgamesh gets into the underworld and he finally gets to Utnapishtim and his wife, and then they tell him, hey, look, you didn't earn this. We survived the flood, and the gods gave it to us. Really, Enlil gave it to me.
Immortality?
Immortality, yeah.
Right.
And then he tells him to do a test to stay awake for 7 days,
Yeah.
and his eyes are closed. They close right away. So I don't want to say one for one, but I wonder if in the prior versions of these stories, as they're circulating, eyes closing having this kind of idea of death, eyes opening. I don't know. Maybe there's no correlation with that. But I thought about the 7 day sleep, which I pulled on that thread too, and it took me to a Greek story with a guy who went to sleep for 56 years in a cave. It's the same guy that the Epimenides. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got Epimenides. You also have a story with Honi the circle drawer who falls asleep for 70.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of cool little interesting things. But anyway, I just thought maybe that had something. And then I don't want to cover your face, so please don't be offended if I drop your super chat to read.
That's fine.
I want to be able to see you. Then the last thing is also prostitution reference to Enkidu, tamed, but Eve devolves Adam. I don't think Eve. I wouldn't say Eve devolves. Well,
I guess because she gives him the fruit.
Okay. Yeah.
She takes first, and then she gives to him. I think maybe you could say that the author probably knows all these stories. I don't think he's trying to make a direct connection to the Enkidu story. But
yeah,
everybody in the ancient world knew the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? So it's always hard not to think of it. It's like any fantasy written today is going to have Tolkien in the background.
True. And I do think there is this idea that Bakken's talking about with the idea of the subordination, like the subordination idea, because why would he have her be the first one to grab the fruit, eat it after there's a disobedience? Don't eat, God says. She ends up doing it. So it makes an excuse to give the man the authority and say, hey, this is the natural order of things. You need to be submissive to him in that regard. He needs to be over you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these texts are also cramming in so many etiologies, right? Well,
Right.
by the way, this is where this comes from, and this is where that comes from. So I think the text is doing multiple things at once. I don't know if Adam becoming Lord over Eve is part of the real myth in it, or if it's just, by the way, this is why men boss around their wives,
Right.
and this is why work is hard, and this is why childbearing sucks.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And I mean, just like the Babel story is an etiology for language, but it's also doing more than that, right? That's kind of
true.
And also, this is where language comes from, even though in Genesis 9, we were already told that the people have spread out and have their own languages.
The story can't keep it together. You know what I mean? It just it keeps on keeping on, huh? I love it when you catch stuff like that. S. Mill still in the house again with another super chat. What do you think about two trees? Shu equals light life. Tefnut, Ma'at, law, good, and Eden. Adam, Atum. Snake equals Wajet equals guardian. And or Apophis equals treachery. Also, Wajet plus Apophis, medieval dragon. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there. Well, Apophis is in the underworld, isn't he? The serpent of the underworld. I think there's an indirect connection between Apophis and then the Levantine Leviathan, Lotan. And then I think there's also an indirect connection between Leviathan and the serpent of the garden. But the more links you have in that chain, I think the weaker the connection is. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. Because most people think it's just a generic serpent, like you would have in Gilgamesh.
Yeah,
for example.
and kind of the thing that stands out when you look at these stories like Adapa and Gilgamesh is that every story about immortality has a snake somewhere in it. And it's just because they symbolized immortality because they could molt their skin and it looked like they were getting a new life.
Yeah, so this is interesting. Apophis, more properly Apep, is the ancient Egyptian serpent of chaos, not a beneficent god, obviously. In Egyptian myth, Apep is the great snake who attacks the sun god Ra each night as Ra travels through the underworld. The gods and Ra's helpers have to defeat Apep so the sun can rise again. So Apep is basically the embodiment of the of the forces trying to stop creation, light, and order. That's interesting. He's usually shown as a giant serpent. He is opposite of Ma'at, truth, order, balance. He is not usually worshipped the way other Egyptian gods were. He is more like cosmic adversary or destructive divine being. So if someone says the god Apophis, that is partly right in the sense that he is a mythic divine figure in Egyptian religion, but he's really the chaos serpent Apep, the enemy of Ra. So that's interesting. I do find it fascinating how much these different myths have in common.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to find the same tropes. Humans want order, and chaos and disorder is all over. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So as for those Egyptian deities being equivalent to the trees, I don't know about that. Like I said, all the research I did suggests that it was mainly Nut, the sky god, and then Osiris, who were associated with trees in Egyptian mythology.
Yeah, Nut.
And of course, then also the Ankh symbol and the jet, the pillar that represents Osiris, might originally have been a tree.
Oh, let's get a picture of that. Can you share your screen and show? So it's in your video, right?
The Ankh is in my video, but not the.
Okay, it'll be cool to show because everybody knows what an Ankh looks like. But
yeah, they're in tons of scarab seals all over Israel and Syria. So you'll have, of course, the scene where you've got two cherubs, like griffins or sphinxes, venerating a tree. And then you'll have the same scene on another seal where it's the Ankh symbol instead of a tree, or you'll have worshippers surrounding an Ankh. And it seems to be that these artisans are equating the sacred tree with the concept of life, which is why these are often considered to be the tree of life.
Isn't that fascinating? Jumping ahead a little to imagine, and maybe I'm making a connection, but the cross itself being a wooden tree in which their God died upon is a symbol of life. The very crucifixion itself gets interpreted.
Yeah, and the Coptic Christians, of course, reused the Ankh as a cross.
Right. I think that's important. I mean, kind of obvious, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, crosses are also a very common symbol in all kinds of ancient religions. The Ankh is a little more distinctive.
True. It's got the little loop thingy going on. So did you want to show a picture just so people can get an idea of what you were coming across?
Sure. Let me just grab my notes here.
I'm looking for the Ankh in your. I might as well share this too. While you look that up, I'm going to show some stuff. There's the Adam and Eve seal in the middle. You do see a tree of life in the middle of some of these sacred tree symbolism. Let's see. What's this one? They got to watch this. This is so good. Oh, there's an Ankh, but not the one that you're looking for. There's an Ankh symbol, Syrian cylinder sill. And then let me take off the subtitles. There's also an Ankh here in the middle. So it's probably Syrian as well. In red. I don't think you'd cover any. I think that's the only spot in it it kind of looks like, I don't know what that is. Oh, there's that Cantillida Druid example too. Love it. Yeah. Fascinating. Then you bring in the same tablet from the book I just mentioned. Haranu. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to mention that one. I need a better way of organizing these on my computer.
Look, that one's cool too, how the goddess comes out as the actual tree in this Egyptian art.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll notice even the trees often have branches in the shape of the Hathor hair, which is kind of like an omega symbol. And I think that's also an implicit understanding that the tree represents a goddess.
Wow. Powerful. I'm looking ahead. There's so much stuff in this thing. And they got to hear the narration too. You do fantastic work on this. All right. So did you find it what you were looking for, or is it just buried?
I have not.
Okay, don't sweat it.
Okay.
This was homework. I'm just testing you on the spot to show some stuff. But anyone can go and look it up themselves and dig in, try and find it. Desonics became a member today. Bless you. Thank you so much. No, seriously, appreciate you becoming a member. You will get early access and have a special symbol next to your name, so you can look down upon those who are next to you with your special symbols. I'm a member of your YouTube channel. In
You are.
fact, I should flex that real quick, actually, just to show. Sometimes I almost forget who I'm members of, but you could see right there. They got a little 1 year, 8 months. Man, I'm going on 2 years almost as your member. Wow. So once I've gone 5 years, I expect a free edit. I'm kidding.
I'll get channel t-shirts made or something.
Yeah, right. Solera Knight in the house with a super duper. Thank you, Solera. Genesis 19, 30 through 38. Daughters got Lot so drunk, blacked out, got pregnant, birthed Moabites and Ammonites. What? Explain this.
Yeah, well, that's another example of where the authors have this story and they just decide to tack on an etiology. So, after Lot flees from Sodom, the biblical authors are like, well, what if we can also explain where the countries of Moab and Ammon came from? And they're a bunch of inbred losers. So we'll just say that Lot did the deed with his daughters, and that's where they came from.
So you do read it as this is a polemic that is being used against a modern group of individuals, giving them an etiological myth for why they're knuckleheads and trying to call them stupid.
So it seems, right? It's a little mean-spirited, but
yeah,
maybe it's just like, relatives giving each other a hard time, right? Because Moab and Ammon and Judah were historically very, very close, very similar cultures, basically spoke the same language.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could be more than one thing like we've been talking about, right? Because, for the longest, I'll bring up the example of the myth that you and I both have heard. In Noah's story, he gets drunk, right?
Yeah.
We know Noah gets drunk. Same book, Genesis, just a couple chapters earlier. He gets drunk and his son sees his nakedness. And there's 4 major views that float around on interpreting this. What this means is, and I got to be careful on YouTube how I say this, but he takes his dad's wife, which is his mom, and does dirty things. He actually does something to his dad, dirty things. He castrates his dad, as we see with Kronos and various other myths in the Greek world. And I can't remember the fourth, but there's another one. And I, for the longest, thought the castration one made the most sense. And then there's another one where it talks about the mother part, him taking his mother. There's some laws that prohibit that. And it talks about it saying that if you do this, you are literally seeing your father's nakedness or something.
I don't buy that one, even though it's popular. It comes from a paper by Bergsma and Hahn a few years ago.
Right.
I favor the explanation that it is reflecting the Urnos legend about castration, but the story has been so heavily edited that you just have to read between the lines now. It never tells you what the actual crime is, and simply seeing someone naked is not a crime in Jewish law.
So I have one where maybe
my cat's getting into trouble. I'll be right back.
Okay. I've got one when Paul gets back that he'll know what I'm talking about, but he may not have tried to connect these dots. And then we'll get back to the incestual crazy story, because one of those stories is what actually introduced me to Paul. So Paul, one that I actually thought, I'm with you. I think that one is definitely up there in terms of its explanatory power. I think has a lot of comparison. But you and I know that in Ugaritic mythology, you have El get shit-faced. Okay.
Oh yeah.
He gets completely plastered, right? And it describes him as if he's dead. He gets so blacked out drunk. God himself gets blacked out drunk and he passes out, right? Now, in the weird text, it describes hair of a dog and weird stuff being mixed into a drink. And then he's and he's remedied from his drunkenness, right?
Yeah.
Well, in that myth, he praises his family because in his state, they don't look upon him with whatever disdain, but they actually try to help him recover and recuperate. So part of me struggles between the castration model and the L got plastered, but his family didn't shun him or shame him in his drunken state. And I struggle between knowing which to go with here. But then you get to another guy who gets drunk and his family does something dishonorable, like his daughters sleep with him. So there's something about this that I don't know where to put my finger on it all, but I wonder if that older L story is in the background behind the Noah and this story we find with the origin of the Moabites and the Ammonites.
Well, I mean, getting drunk is just kind of a universal condition of humankind, so I don't know if you should look into it that closely.
Well, with Noah though, it makes some sense with his family members, you know.
I think it makes sense with Noah because before he was the flood hero, he was the first vintner, right? He's the inventor of vineyards, and he's supposed to bring peace to the land. And so him trying a bit too much of his invention without realizing what the effects will be is kind of a natural way for that story to go.
Yeah. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe. I don't know. I think I read someone, like a scholar, who mentioned that though, and I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Yeah. Solera Knight again with a super duper says, inbreeding was common among Egyptian pharaoh. Why? So there's different myths that have different approaches on incest in the ancient world. Like they don't have as much of a problem, obviously, in Egypt.
Yeah, and royal families were always trying to keep the lineage constrained, right? Mm-hmm. So that happens a lot. People marrying their sisters and so on. I don't know a lot about that topic.
Yeah, no, I did one because I was covering this myth and I was tracing it into all sorts of different stories, different mythologies. I'm scrolling right now. I'm going to see if I can't find it's somewhere deep down buried in this. Bear with me. I'm going to see if I can't find it. Where I cover there's so many different cultures and the way they treat incest is different. In fact, I go all the way to Japan and show they actually have myths that tell you why it's that they give you origin myths of to why it's not okay to act this way. But they have to explain it through, close encounters with siblings and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Let me scroll down here, see if I can't find it. It's way back. Like I didn't even live in this house when I made this video. So we're talking a while. Daniel. My goodness. I have no, dude, it's definitely, Lot's daughters. Maybe it's this one. I don't know. Let me see. Is it this one? Maybe it is. You can't hear it, but I'd have to play it here.
Survival scandal. 3 words that barely scratch the surface of the Bible's most disturbing family.
Or the controversial and complex story of Lot and his daughters, one of the Bible's most troubling episodes depicting desperate measures for survival following the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The scholarly MythVision documentary delves deep into Genesis 19, the very passage that was being brought up. But I go into Egypt too. After I first described the story, is that Egypt? No, that's not Egypt. In her sog, so there's some stuff going on in the Mesopotamian stuff. Here's the Egyptian side. Let's see. I'll just share it in the chat because if not, everybody would have to watch this. But I'm experimenting with AI in these edits. That's for sure. Yeah, I would just say check this out because in this episode, I do cover this incestual stuff that goes on in Egypt, but then I take it into other places in Greece. Scrolling. Persia, describing incestual stuff there, like what's going on there. Rig Veda, Hittites, Ulikumi, You could see I'm getting in further east, Brahma. Anyway, I keep going, and I'm in like Japan now and stuff, and showing you. There's all sorts of interesting stuff worth checking out. I just posted it in the chat. So, anyway, let's do this. Let's do this because I hate your face being cut off, man. Stellara, thank you so much for the super duper. S-Mill back again. Thank you for the super chat. Isis and Osiris were twins who fell in love in the womb of Nut. Is that how you pronounce it? Nut.
I say Newt, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably Newt. I didn't know they fell in love in the womb.
I didn't either.
That's
I mean,
it.
There's so much. There's so many different versions of the various Egyptian myths.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had no clue about that, Esmil. Very interesting. I wonder, what? Because I wish I could call, but it's too late. I'd give Karakuni, Egyptologist friend of mine, a call and get her thoughts. She knows this stuff really well. She would be able to tell us. She also thinks there's more connection between the Christian theology and Egyptian stuff than many Egyptologists who are very cautious about making those correlations. She thinks there's definitely stuff going on between the two.
Well, I've seen it proposed that the idea of the Trinity of one God manifesting in different forms has close parallels with Egyptian theology of that period, in the way that Amun-Ra sort of morphosed into Osiris when he was in the underworld and could switch between these different forms, but I don't recall the details.
Yeah, there's so many. Oh my God, and there's so many variations. Thank you so much for that. Paul, what do you want to talk about, man? Because you are an encyclopedia in terms of information, and it's just about digging it out of you is the main thing.
I don't know. Did you want to talk about Acts more?
Sure. Yeah. What would you like to discuss about Acts? Because godly, I mean, we could get lost in that topic. There's so many. Where do you want to go?
Well, I was just looking a bit more at all the echoes of Josephus in the Book of Acts, and so I think in your recent video you kind of covered the obvious ones, right? So there's the census of Quirinius, which is in both of them and connected to Judas the Galilean. There's the reference to the Egyptian, to the Senchari, and to the to the rebellion of Theudas. But of course, there's lots of other little things, right? So like there's the what was it? Herod's robes, right, in his ignominious death.
Yeah, that one. When you read them both side by side, it's very similar, but also the Angelos shows up. Same, the only difference is the Josephine omen says that 5 days will pass once you see the Angelos, whereas in the biblical account of Acts, it's instantaneous and it's worms. So they just give it like a little spin,
So here's another one, which I didn't see mentioned anywhere in Steve Mason's book. So there's the story of the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Philip is just going down the road and he encounters this eunuch from the royal court of Ethiopia who, for some reason, is on the road to Gaza in southern Palestine. And he's reading Isaiah for some reason, and he's interpreting it the proper Christian way for some reason. And so Philip stops and leads him to Christianity and baptizes him. And then Philip gets he gets transported instantly to Ashdod. Kind of like that guy from FEMA who thinks he got transported to a Waffle House 50 miles away.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's two interesting things about this passage. One is that it's built out of keywords from Zephaniah 2, which includes the places Gaza, Ashdod, Ethiopia, the word worship, the word, I'm going to butcher this, Mesembrias, which means either south or noon. So if you're reading the Septuagint, that word appears prominently in both Zephaniah and in the story of the Ethiopian eunuch because it happens at noon.
Okay.
And also the word treasury, which appears in Acts 8:27, is a pun on Gaza because it's like the same word God's ace. So anyways, that's one sign that this is Luke's storytelling creativity at work and not his skills as a historian, because he's creating this story kind of out of little bits of the Old Testament. But he's also creating it out of Josephus, because there's a story in Josephus about a kingdom called Adiabene, which was in northern Mesopotamia. And one of their heirs to the throne, whose name was Izates, spent his youth in Judea, and he converted to Judaism. And then he went back to his homeland, to Adiabene. And then one day, according to Josephus, a Jewish apostle named Eliezer visited him while he was reading the Torah and convinced him to perform the sacrament, right, and get circumcised and become a full Jew. So you kind of see the parallel there, where you've got this nobleman who happens to be reading just the right part of the scriptures when the missionary comes along, performs the sacrament, and then goes away. So it could be just a coincidence, but they seem to be parallel stories.
I bet you Steve has read this and probably thought about it, but then again, I'm going to run it by him tomorrow and ask him. This is a really interesting one. One that I found, and it doesn't have the same strength as all the other ones he has found. That is Luke, when you like to compare to the synoptic tradition, of course, and John, we can include John. I love what Goodacre's doing, trying to force John into the conversation, because so often we like
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And John even quotes Mark several places, even though people say he doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's important to realize it's in dialogue. In fact, I asked him about the I am statements, which are a unique feature that people say John has. Goodacre says, I know this is going to sound radical, but he says the I am statements are in the synoptics and that John is in conversation with them. So worth checking out in more depth, because we've always distinguished them.
You've been in conversation with this guy, right? Hugo Mendes?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm just getting into his work now.
You're going to love that guy. You're going to love that guy. He's awesome.
Interesting.
Yeah, very, very fun, awesome conversationalist and brilliant. But to the point, I was looking at his Josephus content and diving deep and seeing the connections to Luke-Acts and saw and went, man, it's not just that two separate people couldn't come up with content that overlaps. It's that every feature of character appears. Like if I'm writing a history and you're writing a history at the same time in history, we're usually going to at least have one extra person that the other doesn't have. And Josephus, when he describes in his works, for example, about prophets, about these figures that are behaving this way, he says that there were many others, many more. He only names these. And when you compare his writing in Antiquities to his writing in Wars, he doesn't even keep consistent with his own writings. Why would a random alternative anonymous account just so happen to have the same exact features of a work in Antiquities, yet Antiquities doesn't even have the same features in his own work that he wrote 15 years earlier? So
yeah, that's a good point, right? If there were many of these rebels, and Josephus just chooses to mention 3 of them, it's very strange that Acts mentions exactly the same 3 and none of the others.
And the unfortunate part is because we don't have another historian's work preserved documenting these events from that time in that region, we're anachronistically assuming what Josephus listed is just common knowledge everyone in the known world would have already known, and some random alternative independent account would have picked up on. That's problematic because Josephus himself, who's writing in Wars in this region, doesn't document. When he'll mention Judas, but he doesn't go into emphasis. He doesn't mention many other people. He mentions people he doesn't mention in Antiquities. And my point is how come Luke hits the same features that Antiquities does, not Wars, but Antiquities? All right, so we can make this strong case, right? That's all I was trying to elaborate on. What I found was interesting. I thought it was interesting. I want to hear what you think, because I think what you brought up is interesting. Here it is. The synoptic tradition describes the Sea of Galilee. It uses the Greek word thalassa, and thalassa means sea.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Sea of Galilee. When he goes to land, there are the Gerasenes, Gennesarenes, if you will, the land of the Gennesarenes or the Gerasenes. It's a Gentile land, clearly. And the sea is always called a sea. Mark, Matthew, and John call it the Sea of Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee. They use sea, thalassa. Luke breaks the tradition. Luke uses the Greek word limne, Limne.
Which is more accurate?
The limne is more accurate. Yeah. Historically, that would be a lake, not a sea. Yeah. However, when you turn to Josephus, guess what he calls that body of water? A limne.
He has three names for it, right? The limne, or Lake of Gennesar, the Lake of Gennesaritis, or the Lake of Tiberias.
Right. But it's a limne. And the fact that we know Luke's using Mark, we know he's using Matthew, or we don't know that, but that's disputed. But I think it's pretty obvious that some conversation's happening here. So if all he has is Mark, either way, he breaks the tradition to use limne. And I highlighted this to Steve Mason. I said, why would he break the tradition calling it a sea when his source calls it a sea to call it a lake? And he's like, wow, I never caught that. He's been looking at this for several decades. He's like, I never caught that. And I thought to myself, maybe it's not a strong case of the dependency that you see with the other stuff, but the fact that he would break tradition to call it that gives it that kind of, I'm trying to be accurate. I'm using historical information. And this is what a historian like Josephus actually calls it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've pointed out on my blog is that prior to Mark's gospel, there is no record in any Greek text of the Sea of Galilee ever being called the Sea of Galilee.
Right.
So either that name seems to come from Mark's tradition, or possibly maybe Mark's way of turning this small lake into a much more impressive sea, right? Because the sea has all these connotations of chaos in the Old Testament. And of course, as Dennis R. MacDonald likes to point out, it has strong Homeric connotations as well, right?
Yeah. But even if you look mimetically at Jonah, and I think there's good argument to be made for the scene in Mark, not only being imitative of Homer, but also imitative of Jonah. Jonah is taking place on the sea.
That's right.
And so if he is...
And the storm in Jonah seems to be a template for the storms in Mark and the Synoptic Gospels.
Exactly. And there's a scholar right here.
But don't forget that Hermes walks on the water too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you're right. And that's actually something that Dennis MacDonald highlighted, is that he has the little wings and, of course, walks on water. Bruce Loudon's book, Homer's Odyssey and the Near East, is a must-get for anybody who's interested. In this particular book, he's no longer with us, or I'd be interviewing the hell out of him. He died of cancer a few years back. He has a chapter... Odysseus and Jonah, Sea Monsters, and the Fantastic Voyage. He highlights that Jonah is already imitating Homer. So when you read Mark, if Mark's imitating Jonah, could it look like Homer because it's imitating Jonah? And this is what I brought up to Dennis MacDonald, and he's like, that's an interesting observation. He thinks that Mark does know Homer, but either way you slice it, it would still vindicate MacDonald, is my point, you know?
Yeah.
So we have that. Real quick, we got a super chat here.
Yeah.
Bakken didn't want to leave you hanging for too long, man. Thank you again. What proof do we have that Paul did more than one mission trip? Do you think Paul was made up surname? That Saul is a lying sorcerer called the Egyptian?
Yeah, I haven't done the work of reconstructing Paul's mission trips. I think the name is really interesting because Acts makes a big deal about Paul being a Roman citizen. I don't think that's ever mentioned in the epistles, but all Roman citizens had three names, right? They had their prenomen, their nomen, and their cognomen. And it's a bit strange that we have no idea what Paul's full name was. And then also the name Paulus, whether it's a prenomen or a cognomen, is apparently a very, very rare name in Roman antiquity. It occurs a few times in some provinces, but it's just an unusual name for a Roman person to have.
So have you read Michael Koshinosh's work on the link between Luke-Acts, specifically the Saul material, has a mimetic connection to King David and King Saul.
No, I haven't.
So there's this article right here that a scholar named Michael Koshinosh, who was a student of Dennis MacDonald, wrote, called "Better Call Paul Saul."
Oh, okay. I recognize the title because it's a good title.
It's an excellent title. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have read it.
It's absolutely must read, because what he does is he shows that the name for centuries now, scholars have thought Paul had a different name named Saul. His Jewish name was Saul, his Roman name was Paul, and they're just solving this riddle, right, by giving him multiple names. Well, if you read this carefully, I'm going to give you in a nutshell, but it's really worth reading. There's an episode, King David's fleeing from King Saul, in the Greek Septuagint, which we know they're using. And in the Greek, it's almost verbatim, like identical phraseology, where King David cuts off the side of Saul's, robe or whatever. And then he feels guilty and he cries from the mountain and wakes up Saul, and Saul comes out and he goes, "Saul, Saul, why do you pursue me?" The Greek word for pursue is practically identical to persecute. And Jesus, who is the son of David, says to Saul, literally another Saul, which is a literary thing. Michael Koshinosh doesn't think there was ever a guy named Saul. He was not named Saul. He thinks this is a literary, crafty storytelling, making up the character named Saul. And he says the exact identical thing. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And of course, we know the story. Now, the other part of Bakken's super chat is, I don't know about the mission trip part. I think that there's red flags in this idea that Paul went to Jerusalem several times. His own letters seem like he went once and got a taste and realized, like, maybe he's not going to keep visiting. I don't know. But he has like 4 or 5 trips to Jerusalem in Acts. And, the last one, of course, he's arrested in. But then do you think Paul was a made-up surname? We just brought that up. I don't know. I think Paul would have been his real name. Saul, I think, is likely the inventive fiction. But that it Saul... yeah, go ahead.
It is very strange, though, the way Acts is written, that Saul's name switches to Paul at the very moment a second unrelated character named Paul is introduced. I don't think there's a good explanation for that, right? Because it introduces a Roman soldier, right, named
Paulus,
right, Sergius Paulus, the proconsul of Cyprus.
Right. Well, that guy shows up in Josephus as well.
Does he?
I believe Sergius Paulus. Yeah, let me double check that.
I'm looking at a commentary right now, and there's a Sergius Plautus, known from Pliny, who fits the right date, but the name is slightly different.
Let me double check. Sergius Paulus show up in Joseph. And by the way, while we do that, before we lose track of this part, Saul is lying sorcerer called the Egyptian. This, I didn't get a chance to really elaborate. And in fact, Stephen, my buddy Stephen, who's big on the Greek from Cross Bible, during my debate on the late date of Acts and the other guy took the early date, we got into Q&A and got caught up in this whole Egyptian conversation. And he interpreted the passage as if the Roman centurion believed that Paul was the Egyptian. And this, by the way, there's not a single scholar, there's not a single PhD. I looked this up and I didn't know for sure till after the debate. That's when you start looking in deeper. Stephen had done the research. He did not know. He got pulled on the stream out of nowhere. Tell us what this Greek word means and tell us what the sentence means. And he's like, and it's very ambiguous. Well, it's a complex matter. When you watch the debate, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, Paul. But ultimately, the Egyptian is not Paul. He's asking a rhetorical question like, hey, aren't you going to the mall today? When you know that you're going to the mall or something. Like the question isn't asking like he sincerely is saying you're this thing. The Greek is a complicated thing in English, and some ESV translations say, are you not the Egyptian? But the NRSV says, you are not the Egyptian who led the da-da-da-da into the wilderness, the Sakari, the 4,000 men into the wilderness and all that. So what ended up happening was Stephen jumps into this debate. there were commenters under the debate saying this is the part I lost at. And I'm like, damn it, dude. You guys are supposed to come in here and like know what you're talking about, but they were wrong. I was right. And so Stephen contacts me 2 days later and is like, bro, I just went on a rabbit trail. I'm going to have to make a video out of this. Dude, you were right the whole time. I didn't know. I got sucked into the debate to come on screen and like assess the Greek. But Derek, you were correct. I did all of the commentary, deep research on this passage and what the meaning was and all the scholars. I went into the Greek and all that. So ultimately, Paul is not the Egyptian. But then it gets even worse because we know from Josephus what the Egyptian's role was, what he did, the problems behind it. And the reason why, it seems the reason why, and this is one of the scholarly interpretations, is he spoke Greek in the text, and the Roman goes, hey, hold on, because he's talking to him in Greek, and he goes, hold on, so you're not the Egyptian who led the Sicarii into the wilderness, the Egyptian. Well, I can guarantee you his mom didn't name him the Egyptian at birth, okay? Josephus identifies among all of these prophets and rebels and these fourth philosophy people that are causing the temple's demise in his view, there's two people who stand out. And when I mean stand out, I'm talking about oddly their name stands out. You have the Samaritan and you have the Egyptian. Now ask Steve Mason, why do they name him the Samaritan? His mom didn't name him. Oh, we're going to call him Samaritan. No, he was a Samaritan. And the other guy was an Egyptian. But everyone else was a Judean, someone from this actual land. So when he calls them a name like Judas, he specifically will emphasize a particular thing about them. So Judas the Galilean, or John of Gascala, or the various names of figures, right? He calls him the Egyptian as a shortcut way of identifying him among all the other people. Why does that name pop up in Acts? Yeah. This is strong argument that Steve Mason brings up. And the fact that he conflates the Egyptian as if he's leading the Sicarii, which were inner city assassins, into the wilderness, which they did not do. Like Josephus describes all this in great detail. Acts just puts it in this small little block. Now, say all that to say, when you know that the Egyptian's name is the Egyptian because he's singled out as someone who's not a Judean, and he's not one of these guys it's easy to say, oh, that's that Egyptian, then Acts could make sense why when he speaks Greek, according to Stephen and the scholars who are reading this, sure, people speak Greek, but the common tongue of an Egyptian would have been like someone from the South in America coming up to New York going, hey, y'all, do you mind if I get a cup of stew? And they go, you're not from here, are you? You know, the accent itself, maybe he wasn't speaking fluent, good polished Greek, and he had an accent. Maybe that's one of the interpretations. So Stephen was looking at this pretty deep, but the fact that he answers and says, no, I'm a Jew and I'm from Tarshish. Like, if he was the Egyptian and he thought he was the Egyptian, he should have just been like, I'm from Alexandria. Or if he'd have said he's from a place in Egypt, but no, he doesn't. So every piece of evidence supported what I was saying. And like, I'm being overspoken. By this time, I'm already getting fizzed out because we did our debate, the openings, the closings, everything. And I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of like, all right, I got two guys now on the stream. Nils now like jumped in and he's actively debating my debate opponent. I got Steven hopping on who's like trying to assess this on the start. And the other guy has like Red Bull energy. And I'm just sitting back going, I'll have to react to this later and like review it and show people and explain. But, what do you do? What do you do? It's a learning lesson. I'll tell you from now on, I will say to the mod, don't bring anyone on the platform during a debate, not during Q&A. I don't give a shit because I'm going in and if I lose at a point, let me lose at a point. I don't care. But I had this correct and everyone on the panel was like confused about this. But if they would have studied Steve Mason and saw it, that would have helped me in that debate more. Anyway, you were going to probably say something though.
I don't know. Was I? I was just agreeing with your observations. Like if Luke has his own sources on first century Judea and is not relying on Josephus, why doesn't he know the actual name of the Egyptian? Right.
That's the problem, right? Yeah. And the idea that they would independently use that title is an assumption that this was just a well-known, like everyone would have known this, like Stalin, or he brings up Hitler or Churchill. And that's very unlikely in my understanding. If Luke was actually like someone who was in the region, like this was his known region, like he's a skilled traveler of the Aegean. Like this guy knows locations in the Aegean, likely really traveled a lot of these places. Okay. If he had that kind of ground knowledge in the region of Syria and Levant and all of that, okay, I would scratch my head and go, you know what? Maybe independently they do. He doesn't have that geography. He doesn't have that awareness of that geography. He clearly can't get Quirinius's census properly understood. He says it's worldwide, that Augustus taxed the entire world with that. No, he only the Syria region, which, by the way, Jerusalem fell under during this period.
Well, that brings me to another thing I was going to raise. Luke likes taking these things from Josephus and universalizing them, right?
Right.
And so that happens again with the let me just bring it up on my system, with the famine. Acts 11, Paul says, or Luke says, that there was a great famine that affected the whole inhabited world.
The oikumene, I believe, right?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, we know that famines are caused by different things in different places, and there's no known famine that actually occurred at that time. But Josephus, of course, mentions a serious famine that occurred in Judea around that time. And I think a couple of scholars, maybe Mason, but also Glover and one or two others, have shown that a lot of the same keywords kind of appear in Acts 11 and in Josephus' Antiquities 3 and 20, where he talks about the famine. So it could be, again, it's not solid evidence, but again, we've got this thing in Josephus that would go a long way in explaining why this text also occurs in Acts.
I agree.
And of course, you can combine that with the with Paul's letters, where he talks about sending aid to the saints in Judea, but doesn't mention a famine. So Acts kind of combines those. Okay, there was a great famine, and then Paul went to the churches and brought aid back.
Right.
And there's also a bit of a timing issue, right? Because in Paul, or in Acts, it says this is going to happen during the reign of Claudius, which is what happens in Josephus. But the actual story is set during the time of Agrippa, whereas Josephus's famine took place after Agrippa's death. So there's a bit of a timeline issue there. And we see that a lot, right? The timeline doesn't always quite fit when Acts works in these little tidbits from Josephus.
Absolutely. The other one that, I love that you brought up the famine. He has a few others too. It's not just Quirinius and the famine, but there's a few others where he kind of uses all-encompassing language. He likes the whole inhabited earth, a whole inhabited world.
Again, he's a great storyteller, and he's creating this really powerful image of, that puts the whole world stage in view, and then puts, Jesus and then the apostles as being the great actors of this era, interacting with all these great people, being present for all these great events. It really, I don't know. It's like in a movie where, someone goes back in time and just meets all the famous people, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things. One more that we should bring up is Lysanias, the Abilene, which is Abilene, is how I try to pronounce it. Steve Mason points out this guy was put to death in the 30s BCE. He reigned in the 40s, and I think 44 to 36 BCE, something like that. And then he got put to death in 33 BCE under Cleopatra's, she said, get rid of this guy. Mark Antony puts him to death. And the very territory that he ruled, Abilene, that territory became the marker that his name was constantly referencing. So like if Derek rules the land in which I live, and then I get killed, and later on you reference, the land of Derek, people would be like, we know that territory because this guy back here named Derek, that's who they keep naming, referencing him as a ruler of the land. Well, Lysanias was this important figure. I mean, important enough that Mark Antony and Cleopatra world famous actors put him to death. Okay, that's how big of a figure this guy was. Later, when Josephus references this territory in the 30s, 40s, and 50s of the Common Era, he references this as the region of Lysanias. So when Luke chapter 3, verse 1 is name dropping all these historical players, it says Lysanias, ruler of Abilene. Like, this is in the 20s and 30s, as if there was a ruler named Lysanias in the 20s and 30s of the Common Era. Steve Mason works overtime to show you all the references in antiquities. There's no guy named Lysanias, but back here, because the region is named after this character named Lysanias. And in every circumstance, he's referencing he says the same thing. Like, he even names the people that are different that now take on the territory that is named after this guy way back here. And I post this on Twitter, for example, and people are like, there were 2 Lysaniases, dude, get over it. And it's like, really? So because Luke says there was a Lysanias, that's it. Enough said. And they just buy it. And it's like, okay. No mistakes. It's not as easy as showing the Theudas Judas stuff. You know what I mean?
That's the ultimate get out of jail free card, right? There was 2 of them.
That was it.
Did Jesus did Jesus cast everyone out of the temple at the start or the end of his ministry? Well, he did it twice.
I mean, it's what they do, but the Theudas Judas thing, that's what they do too. Oh, it's another Theudas.
It's 2 Theudases. That's right.
It's like, bro, another one that did the same
there were
thing?
There were 2 censuses under Quirinius.
Jesus cleansed the temple twice. I mean, when do you stop?
Right.
You know? Oh gosh.
You just do it a second time, or yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Pretty wild. Okay, we next one was Solaranite. Who was Melchizedek?
Oh yes.
Order of Melchizedek.
So, okay, let me pull up my stuff here. We actually did a video on this, but
yep.
A few years ago, a Norwegian scholar named Gard Granerod published a really great book that I think explains everything about Melchizedek. And so the basic theory as he has it is that it started with Psalm 110. So let me just look it up here. So Psalm 110 seems to be talking to some kind of priest king, and it says, sit at my right hand, I'll make your enemies your footstool. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. That's how it's often translated. The NRSV offers a second translation. You are forever a rightful king by my edict, which sounds totally different. And those are 2 totally valid ways of interpreting the Hebrew, which is quite vague apparently. The problem is that the word Melchizedek is seemingly not really a name. It's like a hyphenated word that says king and righteousness. So is it referring to a righteous king, the king of righteousness, or someone named Melchizedek? And so the idea goes that for some reason the Septuagint decided that it was a name, Melchizedek, and this idea that Psalm 110 is about some unknown ancient king named Melchizedek kind of caught on. And from there, it found its way into Genesis 14, which is generally regarded as the very last thing to be added to the book of Genesis. Like, it's kind of a story inside a larger narrative that got kind of inserted for probably in the Hellenistic period. And let's see here. Yeah, also the word that is often translated according to the order of means something more like for my sake or because of me. It's a hapax legomenon, which means it doesn't appear anywhere else in the Hebrew scriptures, but they know this word from other inscriptions, and that's what it seems to mean. So it seems to be saying not that you are my king according to the order of Melchizedek. It's saying something like you are a righteous king for my sake.
Mm-hmm.
So originally there was no order of Melchizedek, but that idea kind of took life based on a mistranslation of Psalm 110. And then, people imagine that there's this whole priesthood with its own, its own rules that goes back before the Levites, and Melchizedek was their founder or something. And of course, that takes on a life of its own in the Dead Sea Scrolls and in the Book of Hebrews. It's funny because nowhere else in the Bible is this character mentioned, but once he kind of gets invented in the whole Hellenistic period, he's everywhere.
That's a really interesting. It's an interesting story to watch unravel.
Yeah.
Next super chat, Bakken. The Egyptian was a sorcerer, con man. The leading out is saying he was part of the Essenes, who Josephus reverse calls sorcerers. Simon equals Solace in Josephus. So there are people who might think that. I don't know a single scholar who thinks Simon is Solace in Josephus, but I will say this. The Egyptian does take people to the Mount of Olives, thinking, at least in antiquities, thinking he's going to cause the temple walls to come falling down. So he has,
I think sorcerer or magician is a valid interpretation of the word Josephus uses for him.
Right.
I'm not an expert on the Greek, but I guess that word goes has a couple of ways of being understood. It's usually translated as like imposter, but it has more of a religious connotation.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think he has the magician label, which is not always a positive label. Josephus is using it in a negative way.
Steve Mason, I think, makes that clear that Josephus is kind of differentiating between two kinds of troublemakers. There's the political rebels like Judas, and then there's these religious prophets like the Egyptian.
Let me pull up the...
And he uses different words for them.
So here is, I'm going to drop this. I got these still in here from the debate. So you could see on the right, there are three different groups in the context of that Antiquities 20, where you got group one is the Sicarii, urban assassins with concealed knives who killed in crowded cities, festivals. First victim, the high priest Jonathan. The group two is false prophets. So they're not group one, and they're not the Egyptian. They're imposters and deceivers persuaded the multitude to follow them into the wilderness. Felix destroyed them. So there's a whole different group than the Sicarii. And then group three, this is why Luke-Acts conflates all three into one sentence on the left that you could see where it says, then you are not the Egyptian who recently stirred up the revolt and led 4,000 men of the Sicarii into the wilderness. You could see the wilderness prophets, you could see the Sicarii, and you could see the Egyptian, where it says an Egyptian false prophet got together 30,000 men and led them to the Mount of Olives to storm Jerusalem. Felix attacked, the Egyptian escaped. By the way, 400 people died in that account, which you kind of wonder, is 4,000 over here to the left just an inflation of the 400 that die? Is Luke half-ass reading it, or is he just creative? Like most authors aren't Xerox copying every identical element exactly the same way he does with Agrippa. And I say that because you see this in the gospel tradition. Scholars don't doubt that that Matthew's using Mark, that Luke's using Mark. Look at how they change it too. So it's not a gotcha to pretend that, oh, they couldn't have used it because they changed the things. I find that it just sucks, because no matter what you do, you're never going to get some of these people who are like so defensive about this idea to see how convincing and persuasive this is. But the Essene claim that the Egyptian was an Essene, I'd need direct evidence that he was an Essene, because Josephus mentions three schools. Well, he mentions a fourth philosophy too, but he doesn't really dwell on them. He talks about it being like Judas the Galilean and people that are doing these troubling things which lead to the destruction of the temple. But he does talk about the Essenes, and he talks about the, Sadducees and the Pharisees, but I don't remember him identifying the Egyptian as an Essene. That I don't remember. And the Simon equals Solace thing in Josephus, I don't know. We'd have to see a solid case for me to be persuaded. Just being real. Steve, thank you so much for that super chat. I got my master's in theology decades after leaving Christianity. So I got my master's in theology decades after leaving Christianity. Should I advocate on behalf of theology schools staying open? Cuts to education here. I don't think theology schools should be. I don't think you should go out against them.
I think the more people learn actual theology and biblical studies, the better.
Yeah. So I'm not against it. In fact, I would honestly say, again, I don't know if you feel the same way. It seems you do based on your comment there. I went to Bible college for 2 years and it was a fundamentalist college, but it was like light years ahead of church.
Hmm.
Church doesn't take you there, right? So even in this very statement of faith, rigorous, academic, fundamentalist college, the learning took me to different places than I would have gone just getting sermons from the pastor to make me feel like, oh, yes, my faith is great and life is good as a Christian. So I encourage all education, as I mean, obviously, if it's not harming people, to take your learning to the next level. So I'm not against that at all. But I do
Hmm.
think that a lot of people leave the faith from deeper research, or at least leave the forms of faith they were in.
Yeah.
They end up progressing for sure.
And I think a lot of the blame goes to not the seminaries, but the churches who gave them a false impression of Christian history and everything behind it.
That's a well said. Because if the church didn't, if the pastor started getting on board with critical,
Yeah.
understandings and not making people believe like Bubble Boy that if it's perfect and if it pops, then it's not true. It's like, stop acting like this book is inerrant and infallible and perfect. You won't set yourself up and those who follow this teaching for failure. They should
Yeah,
be,
it's a
yeah,
tough transition when you realize for the first time that your pastor was full of crap, to put it one way. Whether it's theological stuff, or whether it's creationism, or whether it's politics, right?
yeah,
Like how many people took science in university and then deconstructed because of that, right?
a lot, a lot actually.
Like Paul Gia, who did research on dinosaurs and then suddenly realized he'd been lied to his whole life.
Now isn't that odd that someone can study dinosaurs and that makes them go, well, I doubt the whole thing now because it's
Yeah.
like he was a Ken Hamite, you know what I mean? He was
Yeah.
big into the whole young earth creation stuff.
Yeah.
Uh
Were you a creationist, Derek?
I was,
Mhm.
but I think over the years I was willing to hear out Christians who had an old earth creation aspect, and I wasn't I could not accept evolution. I just could not.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I definitely was willing to go with old earth
Yeah.
options.
Yeah. I was raised in a fundamentalist church and school, but I never bought the young Earth part of it because I loved astronomy. And even when I was like 7, I knew that if you're looking at galaxies millions of light years away, the universe has to be really old.
Right, right.
But I had these blinders with the rest of it, evolution and stuff. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I couldn't do the whole evolution thing at all. Now, I didn't know what you probably had learned through the learning through the science that you went through. I look, man, I'm just gonna be honest. I wasn't just listening to Ken Ham. I was listening to Kent Hovind. I mean, I was getting his DVDs at the Christian bookstore and stuff when I worked there because I worked there for like a year as a young teenage fundamentalist. I was at the bookstore.
I was only vaguely aware of those guys. I wasn't like into creationism. I just accepted it.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I'd listen to this car salesman tell me, "Now listen, you're not going to turn into a frog tomorrow." Like it's like Joshua Bowen always talks about. He's able to sound like Kent Hovind. I believed like the Bible. I needed to believe it literally, and then again, once you stop, it pops. It's not good. Bakken again. Thank you so much, Zedek. What is it? How would you pronounce that there at the end? Zedek? I don't know.
I'll take it.
TZ with the K reference to Kenna.
Honey. Oh, I see.
Kana.
Zedek.
Kana. Both mean plumb, measure, canon. Cannabis was in holy oil. Melchizedek is anointed king. We know he's anointed. Perhaps Balaam. Now, I do want to say this. I don't know if this is what Bakken's getting at, but Melchizedek in Cities That Built the Bible, Robert Cargill.
Cargill.
Yeah, he talks about this. He thinks that Melchizedek was a king of Sodom, not Balaam, but Sodom.
Yeah.
Um.
That's a common view. I completely disagree, but you know.
Okay. Okay.
I think there's zero historicity in that little snippet of Genesis.
Yeah. So then, do you understand what Bakken's getting at here?
I am struggling to understand what he means by plumb and measure, canon, cannabis.
Well, I get canon and measure and plumb. I understand what that is itself, but it's like, how does that connect to? Is it Kenna that means those things? And what's Kenna have to do with Zedek? You know what I mean? I'm trying to Melchizedek.
Righteousness, justice. It's probably related to Zadok and Sadducee, Zadokite, all that stuff.
Right. So hold on, they just gave me another thing. Jewish Wars 2. Do you have access online to Jewish Wars 2 159? And then Antiquities, so you just got to do one at a time.
Yeah, I mean,
thank you again, Bakken. Jewish Wars 2 159. So I have, my problem is on my paperbacks, which is I'm having a hard time with this computer. I'm waiting on my new computer to get here. It's that's why you hear a pop in my voice when I'm talking. I can't control it. There's nothing I can do about it. This computer, my wife's doing taxes on her laptop where I'd be using it and I wouldn't have audio problems. But I found out from Steve Mason to not use this Josephus translation if I can help it, because it's like the 17.
I don't like the old one, and I'm having trouble finding a good one to use. Let's see.
He says to go with you want to go with the Loeb. He said that's a really good one. He said.
Okay.
There's also a modern one that he played a part in.
Yeah, I've seen that it exists. It's super expensive though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Book 2, page 168.
Mike, this is a built-in Mac, so I think it's because it's just I've got so much on it, and it needs to be like completely factory reset and everything. But I'm also trying to edit and export massive files all the time, and it's dragging. It's old. It's like a decade old in terms of the model.
I'm reading the right part of Jewish Wars. It's thereupon Judas, glad to endure anything to save his brother, flung himself at Joseph's feet, striving by any means to mollify and appease his wrath. And all the brethren fell down before him, weeping and offering themselves as victims to save the life of Benjamin. It's about the story of Joseph. I don't think that's what he's referring to, though.
Okay.
That's Antiquities 2, section 159. Well, let me look up. Or sorry, that's Jewish Wars 2 159. Now let me look up Antiquities.
Okay.
Oh, that's why I'm getting Wars and Antiquities mixed up, of course. Okay.
Billy says, Derek, look at the Ophiuchus sits in the celestial pantheon. It will answer your question earlier about the serpent aiding the reconstruction of the dead god. It wouldn't shock me if there's some story that has been told in the heavens in some way that relates to these things, for sure. Zedek is documented as a Canaanite deity. I believe so. It seems like 99% that's what the name relates to, rather than trying to dig into word roots. Someone said.
Yeah, I know there's people that hold that view. There's exceptionally little inscriptional evidence for an actual deity of that name. So it's a contestable. Like, there's a lot of different. These are all valid and interpretations of Melchizedek held by very smart scholars who know more than I do. I just don't. I've read all the major books published on Melchizedek, so my own opinion is that it's not a theophoric name, and it's not based on an actual king of Sodom.
Gotcha. He's pulling up Antiquities, friends.
Okay, there are some among them who profess to foretell the future. I don't know if that's what he means.
In
Okay,
antiquities?
Essenes. There's another order of the Essenes. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because I don't think the Egyptian comes up in Antiquities 15, though.
Yeah, so 2159 is about the Essenes and their ascetic lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if that's what Bakken's getting at. Bakken, are you talking about connecting the Egyptian or just simply talking about the Essenes? And maybe these super chats are so truncated that I'm identifying your connections wrong because you're just trying to load in your super chat some stuff here. My point was simply saying that I would need evidence that directly says the Egyptian, was in the school of the Essenes or something like that, if that makes sense. But I don't know exactly what you're getting at. You were reading from Antiquities 15, 371?
Me?
Yeah.
No, just now I was reading from Moore's 2.
Oh, Bakken's saying that they were called magical sorcerers. Yeah, but anyone who Josephus disagrees with would fit into this. Like, you would imagine even the Samaritan would be under the category of a magician. People like Theudas, others who are going out and acting like they're going to split the Jordan River and perform magical wonders and deeds would be called sorcerers. I just don't see sorcerer connecting to Essene because some Essenes might be called sorcerers. I think that there might be a what's that fallacy, correlation, causation kind of thing here, where many people are called sorcerers. Simon the Magus, of course, it's a pejorative, but there are people who are performing these deeds who aren't called that because it's okay as long as it's our guy. But I don't think tying the Essenes to sorcerers, then tying that to the Egyptian demands he must be an Essene. Do you get what I'm saying, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would have to be speculative at best.
By conflating the two magicians and then backing Saul from being one like the Essenes. Conflating the two magicians and then backing Saul from being one like the Essenes. I imagine there are many different people that are called magicians.
Because if he's referring back to Acts 13, right, there are other magicians in that passage, right? There's the Jewish guy named Bar-Jesus. And then there's the magician Elymas.
Yeah.
And the whole passage is a little mysterious. Again, this is then where the proconsul Sergius Paulus shows up, and then Saul's name suddenly changes to Paul. Like, this is one of those passages I just don't know what to make of.
Yeah. Yeah, what's going on there? I would need to dig into Josephus more and see the relationship between calling someone a sorcerer or a magician and Essenes, because often my understanding is there's lots of scholars who've identified that term with Persians. The Persian magi that are often identified.
The Magoi were originally Persians.
Right. So, and that doesn't mean all Magoi would be identified as Persians. Maybe it's taken on a name of its own. I would need to dig into that further. But yeah, I just don't think, what I'm trying to say, my criticism of this idea is that every person who then becomes a magician needs to be identified as an Essene. I don't see that. I think that people who might follow whatever weird philosophy they might follow would get identified under this rubric of sorcerer or sorcery or whatever, and they don't have to be in the school called the Essenes. They could have been part of some other school or something. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyway, Paul, we were talking about Acts, and did you pull up Antiquities 15 and already looked at that, or?
Yeah, it's just another description of the Essenes, but
okay,
yeah, and then both passages mention their use of oil, right? Like for anointing and purification rituals,
right?
But Josephus just doesn't go into much detail.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so we talked about Lysanias. Wrapping up on Acts, because I don't want to keep you too long, and I really appreciate you hanging out with me. And we need to shamelessly plug your channel. We did Lysanias. We didn't really dwell on Theudas in this discussion, but I think that's a like, I've got people on Twitter right now losing their minds about this, and they're like, you're just parallelomania. You're not seeing it. You're not getting it. And I'm like, I'm not getting it. Maybe you should go read before you criticize the position.
Yeah,
because
this is one of those situations where you just need to see if the other side even understands the argument. Can they strongman it for you?
Yeah, look, I got a better example, right? This is the old version. I took a picture with my phone. There's on the left, right? This is the William Winston translated, okay? To show people in Antiquities 20, chapter 5. All right, you can see the highlight. The highlight with the red arrow at the bottom is Theudas. He's mentioned under Cuspius Fatus. This is in 44 CE. He gets killed in 44 CE. Then if you continue just another paragraph down the road and keep going, it says the execution of the sons of Judas the Galilean. And it goes even further. In fact, I'm going to pull my not the greatest translation, but I have it already open and ready to go. Book 20, same page I took that exact photo from, just to show everybody. It's the same exact one, so you don't think I'm like playing any games here. Go look it up yourself. The sons of Judas of Galilee were killed. I mean, of the Judas. So he says the name Judas of Galilee. It says Judas the Galilean. I mean, of Judas who caused the people to revolt when Cyrenius came to take an account of the estates of the Jews. Quirinius, right?
So the point is that because Josephus is bringing up the death of Judas's sons, he recaps who Judas was.
Right.
As a result, you have Josephus talking about Theudas and Judas in that order, even though they lived in the opposite order.
Right.
So then when Luke comes along and mentions them as if Theudas came first and Judas came second, he's got the order wrong. And the best explanation is that he remembers this passage from Josephus that mentioned them in that order.
That's the problem, is that it literally gets the identical chronology to Josephus, and you could see why he made the boo-boo. Isn't it chapter 6? What is it? Chapter 7?
Acts 5.
Oh, it's Acts 5.
Yeah. So Acts 5 says, in those days, Theudas arose, professing to be somebody. He was killed, and those who followed him were dispersed. After this man, Judas the Galilean arose in the days of the census. So Acts mistakenly thinks that Theudas was a rebel before the days of the census, before Judas the Galilean. And in fact, Theudas was a rebel after this conversation is happening in history.
So let me break it down slower, because you just hit, this is the important point people don't see. And the recent debate I did, if you don't know this, this is really important to have your mind wrapped around, right? We're looking at the book of Acts. Acts says Gamaliel, which is right here, right? He's a Pharisee in the council, teacher of the law, respected by the people.
This scene in Acts is taking place in the 30s, right? Or
this is in the 30s. So anytime, maybe late 30s, maybe 36, somewhere around there, somewhere. And Gamaliel says, for some time ago, so sometime in the past, Theudas rose up, claiming to be somebody. And a number of men, about 400, joined him, but he was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and disappeared. Now look at the chronology. Theudas, sometime ago, in the 30s, he says. So he's earlier than the 30s, this guy named Theudas. After Theudas, right, after him, Judas the Galilean rose up at the time of the census. That's Quirinius, which he already mentions in Luke at the beginning of Luke for the birth narrative, and got people to follow him. He also perished, and all who followed him were scattered. So you see Theudas first, then Judas the Galilean. Now here's the problem. When we pull up Josephus, you literally have Theudas, the bottom arrow on the left, after him, Judas, the same exact order that you have in Acts. The problem is that the guy on the left in Josephus is in the 40s. It's after the time Gamaliel is speaking. 44 to be exact. 44 of the Common Era. Judas is around 6 CE. We're talking 30, 40 years gap. And Acts has that same order, but he's got Theudas before Judas. Why? Because Theudas is before Judas here. But in the second mention, he's doing a flashback to when he mentioned Judas in another book. Acts messed up. This is so obvious to scholars who've been obviously persuaded by the overwhelming cumulative evidence from Lysanias, Agrippa, the Theudas Judas stuff, the Sicarii. My gosh, what else? There's the Pharisees argument. By the way, we didn't even get into that. According to Steve Mason, when I wrote him recently, I said, which one's your favorite? Because Theudas is the easiest one for me to explain. And he said, honestly, the strongest is the Pharisees argument. I'm like, really? And he's like, yes. The word he uses is hieresis, which is a unique term constantly used by Josephus to refer to three groups. Luke-Acts uses the exact same Greek term when he's referencing the same groups. And so it goes way deeper. The argument is very, very much deeper. Here it is. Three philosophical schools. Hieresis on the right, you see Josephus talking about the philosophical schools. The most precise interpreters of the laws. That's what he calls the Pharisees, but he's not a fan of them. He's not cool with them. Only, look, threskia, right? At the bottom, only 23 uses in all Greek literature before Josephus. Josephus uses it 91 times. Of the first 34 uses of the verb form, 23 are Josephus. And then you have all that formulation in Luke-Acts in the Greek. People are sleeping on Steve Mason. They're sleeping on this guy. They don't even realize what he's done. Yeah, we ought to build an altar to Steve Mason. You know what I mean? Anyway, we got one more here. Bakken says Theudas is Jude, the brother killed in 44 during Felix, during famine. Rebels equal zealots, innovators, Essenes. So the Essenes part is where I don't know where to connect the Essenes to all of the zealots in this case, but maybe there's some. I'm not saying there aren't Essenes who are, but just conflating all of them is my problem. Paul is called Egyptian in place of Theudas. Yeah, I don't see all that connection. The Egyptian isn't Theudas. But I don't know. I'm having a hard time understanding what you're trying to say exactly. Am I missing something here, Paul, that you see? I'm having a hard time with this one.
Yeah, I'm just reading through Acts trying to see if I can catch what he's getting at.
Yeah, Theudas is Jude, the brother killed in 44 during.
So the Theudas stuff happens in Acts 5. The Egyptian is mentioned by the Roman tribune in Acts 21.
Right. Theudas is Jude.
And that's when the author of Acts gets confused between the Egyptian and the Sicarii.
Right.
So they're
I just don't see why we leap between a name of someone in a text named Theudas to another named Jude. Things like that are what makes me pause.
Again, kind of going back to Luke's storytelling tendencies. I think these things are in here just to set the atmosphere, right? To situate this story in the larger story of Judea's fight against the Romans and its history of rebels.
Right.
Because it's portraying, I think it's maybe trying to downplay ideas that the early Christian apostles were also rebels against Rome, right? The whole point is that Paul is not like all those Jewish rebels.
Right. The whole point is the Christian movement is nothing like any of them. And that's why Gamaliel in his speech is saying, brethren, I'll pull it back up here. He says, I tell you, keep away from these men, after he just named these guys who are troublemakers. Keep away from these men because they've been mistreating the Christians, right? Because if this plan or this undertaking is of human origin, it will fail. Don't worry. Don't bug them.
This isn't Gamaliel talking. This is the author talking. And Gamaliel is a device, right?
Yes. I mean, that's at the fundamental level. Yeah. But I'm simply saying that, like, in the story, this author is trying to tell you something like you're saying, And he's using Gamaliel, this teacher of the law, and he's very respected among Jews. In the mouth of Jews themselves, they say, don't mess with them. But notice the Jews don't stop. They keep messing with them from city to city, town to town, trying to get them in trouble. And the Romans have to get them out of trouble, right? So he's saying they're not like these men. If they are of God, this is the funny part to me. But if it is of God, you will not be able to overthrow them. In that case, you may even be found fighting against God. Greek word there, fighting against is the God is theomakoi, which is a well-known tradition in the Greek world. People were fighters against Dionysus. Pentheus was a fighter against Dionysus with theomakoi. All this is a common tradition. That term just gets used for people who are fighting against the cult. But this is it's clearly fiction trying to say, hey, this movement isn't like this human movement, Theudas, Judas, and all that. This is divine. That's why you see at every turn miraculous stuff happens and the Christian message goes forth and it ends successfully with the gospel going unhindered. But to the super chat that Bakken was saying, so he says, okay, now he's going a little bit further. Compare Acts 21 with story of Theudas. Essenes were seen as rebels to Herodians. The Zealots refers to both Essenes and Sicarii. This is why Luke conflates. So Josephus doesn't make this conflation, is my point. And I'd need to wrap my mind around where in Josephus.
It seems like he's proposing the Essenes as like a common link between the Sicarii and the Egyptian.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there were literally only 3 schools, right? I think that there were more. There were many other schools, but these were the 3 main ones that I think Josephus cares about. He mentions a 4th that he doesn't want to talk about. But there were probably
Zealots?
Huh?
Or maybe I have that wrong.
Yeah, there's a 4th philosophy, which they're all philosophies, but there's a 4th one. And this one is like the most shameful of all. And it seems that's the one that's leading all these people to be radicals and create problems like Judas the Galilean and others. Right. They are the Zealots. I think you're right. They're at least titled that in certain situations.
Yeah.
But see, a lot of people conflate the Sicarii and the Zealots and stuff like that. When you talk to Steve Mason, who's literally the world's expert on Josephus right now, I think he's the best right now. He points out the Sicarii are not the same. All they were knifemen assassins. They were hired assassins. They weren't doing this under some religious zeal, like the prophets were leading people into the wilderness. They were a different group of people who were hired hitmen, who would even be hired to befriend you and then get close to you and kill you with the Sika blade.
I think this is where treating Acts and Luke as a historian leads you astray from actually getting the message, right? Because at the narrative level, the point is not who the Sicarii were, it's not who the Egyptians were, it's not who Theudas was. The point is just that Paul and the Christian movement are not like these rebels. You can trust Paul, you can trust the Christians. And this message is not aimed at the characters in the story who are living in the 30s and the 40s. It's aimed at the reader who is living maybe in the 130s, right? After the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Right. Could
but
be.
At any rate, you have to take it at the narrative level first and see what the message is to the reader. And the message, I think, is that Paul is a trustworthy messenger of, the Christian message, and that this message triumphed because it was true.
Yeah, this interesting point you made me reminded of. That's one of the things that Mason said was that what Luke's doing with it, if you read it like that, and maybe Bakken is reading it like that and saying Luke's conflating these things, Luke thinks these are the same things. I don't know. Maybe Luke does. Maybe Luke doesn't have a overly care about the actual details of how to understand a lot of these categories, that Josephus is very much going out of his way to emphasize differences and not equivocating the two different groups. Then yeah, I could see that. But what Steve says is, and he doesn't even die on the hill of the order thing that I brought up with let's go to the Theudas example, right? Mm-hmm. He says this is plausible, right? That ordering, absolutely. Scholars have identified it. He's not the only one. He does think there may be something to it, but he says even more at a satellite view, he says, you got to understand what Luke's doing here. He's trying to say there's a group of people. These are bad groups of people. These are human groups of people. The Christian group is the one. It's Gamaliel saying if it is of human, it won't make it to the utter ends of the earth, but it makes it. So the whole point is it's a fiction to tell you he's not like all these other cults that came and gone and movements that came and gone. And according to Steve, he's not even concerned. According to Steve, Luke is not even concerned with the accurate specificity of
just window dressing.
Window dressing. That's his point. Because if you read about Theudas in let's go back to Acts here, right? If you read about Theudas, look at this. For some time ago, no specifics. Theudas rose up. When? Just some time ago. Claiming to be somebody, a number of men, about 400 joined him. He was killed, and all who followed him dispersed and disappeared.
It's like in a movie where one scientist begins his explanation by saying, as you know, and then gives the exposition that's actually for the watchers of the movie and not for the characters in the movie, right?
Right, exactly.
This is a movie, and it's a good one.
It's a good one. But that's the point, right? When you read Josephus, he gives you exact details of when Theudas rose up, who killed him, why they killed him. Like, it's much more specific. That's why he's saying, look, he's using him to pepper in window dressing to make his point. And I get why if one's reading Luke and says, oh, I'm reading Luke and I'm taking Luke serious like I would Josephus, you might could run into some conflations. Because Judas, by the way, Theudas, his whole game, when you read Josephus, is not the same game that Judas is playing. Yeah. Judas is there for taxes. Theudas is a prophet in the wilderness who believes he's going to split the Jordan River. It has nothing to do with taxes. They're not even the same. They're not doing the same. They have no, if you were to ask him what his CV was, he would not say tax revolt. Judas would say tax revolt. Theudas would say, I believe that God's going to split the river and I'm a prophet like Jesus probably ran around claiming and others. And yet this movement, of course, succeeded. That's ultimately what I do. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. I think trying to go after the historicity too much, like apologists do, it has the great irony of making them miss the whole message. They miss what Luke is actually trying to tell them, and you see that over and over in the Bible. If you try to force it into this mold of inerrancy, you have to ignore the actual message over and over again.
Yeah, so I would just, my only thing, Bakken, would be, I think Luke conflates them probably out of not being overly careful with his sources and with what he's trying to paint the picture as. So it's easy to think that Luke might be thinking these are the same thing, just like he did with the Sakari, the Egyptian, and the wilderness, which, by the way, Josephus separates as 3 different categories. Luke just conflates them. He doesn't really care. He's just putting in this window dressing of history. All right, Solera Night, 2 Peter 3, with Creator one day as 1,000 years.
Yeah, so this is I think this is another thing about creationism, right? So one escape hatch when you're trying to read Genesis literally is to say that the 6 days of creation are like they could be eons long periods of time because God's off in his own time zone and he thinks only a day passed, but actually it was 4 billion years. And I would have agreed with that because I used to be a gap theorist. I thought that, or somewhere between gap and day age, which is kind of how old Earth creationists think, right? They think, well, these days of creation are symbolizing long periods of time when maybe the animals got created in stages. It still doesn't work, right? Because you're trying to make it fit with geological time, but still deny evolution.
Yeah.
So did God create dinosaurs and then 1 million years later, or 100 million years later, he created the pollinating plants, and then 100 million years later, he created mammals?
Yeah,
I mean, that's better than 6-day literal creation.
Yeah, it is. I think Augustine had some other way of reading a lot of that 1,000-year day stuff with creation as well.
Yeah.
And the end.
I mean, at least, you know, at least even within conservative theology, there's lots of ways of interpreting Genesis. You don't have to be a creationist to be, a Christian or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Solera, I think that Second Peter is a famous, the failure of the apocalypse, cognitive dissonance kind of passage, in my opinion. Like, this is a way to get the movement to keep holding on at all costs. By the way, Bakken says Josephus calls the innovators abandoning their divine service. And then above they said, and I missed this because it's easy to see the super chats and stuff. Leading men, that is 400 verse 4,000. 400 men died according to the story.
I mean, even I get confused. And Josephus, I think, changes the numbers, right? In wars.
Yep. From wars. So if Josephus is changing his own source, for those naysayers out there that might be contesting, oh, well, hold on, Josephus and Luke-Acts aren't identical on the numbers. Bro, have you not read, look at the Old Testament passages about David numbering his army, and then look at the rewrite. They're not the same numbers. The numbers aren't even the same in the Bible itself. So, yeah. But this is a really interesting point. I think Bakken's pointing out that the 400 that are mentioned that die in Josephus, there's 4,000 men that are mentioned in Luke. And that's why I wondered, maybe he saw the 400 men that died and thought, well, 4,000 men followed him. And that was just a simple way of him. Like, I feel like Luke half-ass read Josephus. That's my best explanation.
I think Steve Mason suggests that it's like he heard it or read it recently and is going by memory.
Yeah.
And then it'd be easy to get 400 and 4,000 mixed up, or, make those kinds of mistakes.
Oh,
the number is not important because the author doesn't really care what really happened. He's got a different message he's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Josephus cares, which is why he'll correct his numbers I'm sure Josephus did research between the writing of Wars and Antiquities, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he did.
They're separated by about 20 years.
Well, not only would he have had more information, just the older you get, but according to Steve, he only had so many volumes in Wars, whereas he had 20 to work with in Antiquities. So he has way more room to elaborate and flower his own narrative. It's a narrative. It's history, but it's a narrative. People miss that too, because that's the other thing I love about Steve is he points out how people read it for the longest. Scholars thought, oh, it's just an information place. You could just go grab information because it's just facts. No, he's telling you a story. It's a history, but it's his story. It has his biases. It has his perception. Everything that you would see through his lens. That's why when Luke-Acts shares the same outlook, perceptions of the same things, like the Pharisees or the Essenes, or not the Essenes, the Theudas, Judas, Sicarii, all that, in a negative light the same way. Other historians don't necessarily look at the same figures from World War II, for example, identically. Someone might think Churchill was a hero, and another one might think, no, I actually think he was a scumbag. And yet, they don't have to be on everything identical. Anyway, Luke promotes, thank you, Bakken, the Pauline sect and loops the Essenes in with other enemies of Herod and Rome. It's why they avoid talking about the death of the apostles. Royal blood was threat, different gospel. Luke promotes the Pauline sect. I feel like, and I'm giving you my opinion back. Tell me what you think, Paul. Mm-hmm. I think Luke is demoting while still keeping Paul. He's trying to he wants to keep Paul as a hero, but I think he's trying to tame Paul. Paul's too radical in his letters. I think he's promoting him. I'm just using the word demote because he needs to flatten Paul out to be subordinate to the Jerusalem church to make everything okay.
Yeah. Well, he's rehabilitated, I think is the word people sometimes use, right? So in the early 2nd century, you have the problem that Paul is considered the apostle of the Marcionites. And so there's probably skepticism about Paul in some parts of Christendom, right?
Right.
Justin Martyr never mentions Paul. But then Acts goes a long way to say that Paul was actually on the side of the Jerusalem apostles and all the rest. and yeah, makes everyone seem much more unified than you would get from reading Paul's own epistles.
Well,
But
see, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, that's basically all I have. But that's another reason why Acts seems to be a 2nd century document, is because there was this need to kind of unify the church and get the Pauline side to defect over to the Catholic side, right? The Petrine side.
That makes sense to me.
And
Why
you couldn't have that if Paul was seen to be associated too closely with Marcion and against the other apostles.
I think you're onto something there. You know, Bakken, I may have misunderstood a lot of these super chats because there is an ironic thing that goes on in Luke-Acts. He doesn't mention the Essenes by name. Yet when you read Josephus, he does mention all 3 schools. But who gets mentioned? The Sadducees and the Pharisees. Where are the Essenes in Luke-Acts? He doesn't mention them. So does he know them? Are they the Christian movement in some way? And he's identifying that movement as the Essenes? Is it the other groups that you're saying that are the enemies that are a man-made sect? I don't know. But you're saying the Essenes in with other enemies of Herod and Rome. I do know there's some beef, from what I understand, in Josephus about the Essenes and Herod, which Herod would have been a stand-in for probably Rome in some sense. But maybe they didn't. Maybe they had a very Herodian hate, but not necessarily for Rome itself. Judas is specifically leading a tax revolt because when Herod is gone, ultimately the priests are this. If you watch my documentary that I just launched, which is like 3 hours, it's the best Luke-Acts borrows from Josephus documentary, and it's all Steve Mason. He points out how when Herod is gone and is no longer around, there's a black hole. And the priests don't want another Herod ruling over them. But neither does the emperor want to risk it and have another local ruler. So he sends a important Roman figure, not as important as the northern Syrian leader, because the Syrian leader is in the border of Parthia. So he has a very important close companion ruling the region of Syria, and he sends a lower knight, equestrian knight, to rule this region. Well, they start taxing. This is the Quirinius. Quirinius is this knight. He starts taxing the region. Roman soldiers are now coming to the land, and the people aren't fans of it. I know I'm saying a lot here, but I'm saying a lot to say this. Judas doesn't necessarily need to be categorized with Essenes in this regard, because his whole goal was like, we're not paying taxes to some faraway land. If we're going to pay taxes to a local place where we see the money actually in the Holy Land and it's actually helping improving our place, cool. But he's fighting against them, and he says something about mortal rulers. You're going to allow these mortal rulers to rule over you. He seems to have a philosophy that he's not into the fact that there's mortal rulers. Now, if I could see a text that explicitly said that he was an Essene, or these characters were Essenes, like clearly, look, I would just repent right now to the Bakken. Publicly repent to the Bakken, because you might be seeing something I'm not. Then he said it's why they avoid talking about the death of the apostles. I think the reason that they avoid talking about the death of the apostles, first of all, the main ones being Peter and Paul, is pretty obvious in the book of Luke-Acts. Do you agree with me here, Paul? The reason why the author wouldn't have narrated the death of Paul and the death of Peter is because Romans, Nero specifically, is the one who does it. So if you're painting a story where the Romans are innocent, you go out of your way, even in the Luke gospel, you go out of your way that when Pontius Pilate gets his hands on Jesus, he has to hand him to Herod, and then Herod has to hand him back, and he's like, you guys won't do it? Damn it, wash my hands. Like, he doesn't want to kill Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think definitely whatever happened with Paul's death, it wasn't helpful to the author of Acts for what he was trying to do. And when we do get it narrated in the Acts of Paul, of course, it's a ludicrous story that couldn't possibly historically accurate.
Yeah. Again, to just,
I'll also point out that Herod in these, like all other historical references in Acts, Herod is kind of a stereotypical figure. He's not really the historical. Like when it says Herod in Acts, it corresponds to King Agrippa the First.
Right.
But
Right.
when Acts says King Agrippa, it means Agrippa II. There's not really, it's not even clear if the author knows that they were different kings or not.
Mm.
And there, and even certain aspects of Herod in Acts recall to mind the pattern of King Herod the Great. Like he's kind of a larger than life villain.
Let's wrap things up. You got to get off.
My wife's heading to work, so I was saying bye.
Oh, okay. Okay. Royal blood was a threat, though. That is fact. And in fact, I'll say this. It's James Tabor who really has me thinking about the importance of the dynasty idea that there is something there in terms of this kind of I want to use the word for what Muhammad had with his companions and stuff, where he had a can't remember the technical term.
Like a succession dispute.
Yeah, it's a dynasty, pretty much. It's a dynasty. And I think that there is this royal aspect. Like they seem to have pedigree they're giving him in some way. And I think that is a threat. Anyone who's claiming to be a king, Messiah, is going to be a threat, period. Bottom line. But how many people were inventing genealogies and were crafting that they were these things? I don't know. I don't know how common that was. How many of them really believe they had the genealogy that does tie back to these, biblical caliphate? That's right.
Okay.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, isn't there even suspicions about Josephus's own genealogy?
Yeah.
I could be misremembering.
I think you're right. I think there's something there.
And I mean, and in the book of Tobit, the angel Tobit has a genealogy. I mean, that one's real.
Oh gosh.
Or the angel Raphael has a.
What about the story where Josephus is like in the caves of Masada, up in Masada, and like they're pulling straws on who's committing suicide first, and he's the last one with the straw. Like everyone else ended up. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, vaguely. Do you believe that story?
That's what I'm saying. I don't. Yeah. Bro, he says stuff like Jesus ben Ananias, which there's a scholar. I have the article. I don't know if Westar Institute's going to send me the book or not, or I don't know if the volume they have that or not. But you've heard of Wheaton. You're the one who mentioned it to me.
I told you about it. I've got it right here.
Yeah. Yeah. But dude, there it is. Forum.
This is hard to get now. There's no digital versions. I think it's out of print.
Yeah. That in Wheaton's argument is that Mark's even using Josephus, and the woe saying Jesus, who's woe to you, woe to Israel, woe you, blah blah blah. Okay, in Josephus, this guy who's this prophet-like figure, who's completely lunatic, is going and getting himself into trouble because he won't stop saying woe to everybody. And finally, they go and they discipline him and they lash him, and like to the point where it describes his flesh, open and hanging, and he doesn't make a sound. Or
they
something.
Scourge him, and he says not a word in his own defense, almost using the same words that Mark uses later.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it goes a little further where this is the part where it really gets me, bro. It's like 7 years later, the armies are surrounding Jerusalem, right? And then he's standing on the wall and he starts to speak. He was silent for like 7 years, said nothing. And then he just goes, woe to you, Israel, woe to you, blah, 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 woe to you, woe to you. And then last of all, and Josephus writing this, and last of all, he says, woe is me. And then the rock comes crushing him on the temple. How the hell do you know his last words, Josephus? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously already a legend built up around this character that Josephus knows and is hyping for the storytelling value.
I think that's fascinating. Maybe there was a dude floating around who did that. He might be just
he's probably real. Yeah.
But it's that conclusion. Come on, bro.
Who knows how he actually died of it.
Oh, look, I got to give you another plug. You spent quite a bit of time with me. Sorry for keeping you so long. We had super chats and everything. If everybody can do me a favor, do yourself a favor, honestly, go to Inquisitive Bible Reader's YouTube channel. My buddy Paul when I say like this guy really goes deep, I mean it. Paul is one of the guys I can rely on. I can contact and say, hey, Paul, can we dig into this and see what's going on? And he'll have 15 wild scholars I've never heard of that are just brilliant. And, you know, you've been a friend, a personal friend, but also someone I look up to learn from. And I really appreciate what you do with your channel. I hope that we can help grow what you're doing to eventually get you full time doing something like this. And, you know, it would be really cool to see you do this full time somehow. Literally. I love what you do, man. I hope people will go subscribe to your YouTube channel. Can you tell everybody, you know, some of the stuff you do or why they should go subscribe?
Well, if you just want someone who nerds out about the Bible and looks for ways to connect dots that you probably haven't heard before, that's what I'm trying to do. And because I'm not a credentialed scholar, I have a higher barrier of having to show my homework and convince my readers and my viewers that that these theories have merit to them.
Check it out. Go check it out. And if you're looking for his channel and you struggle and for whatever reason you didn't see it pinned, you didn't see it, whatever, if you go to the bottom of my YouTube page, you can't miss it. Okay. It's the 4th, literally. The Joshua Bowen and Neil from Gnostic Informant have you beat. That's how close.
And deservedly so.
Huh?
I said deservedly so.
Well, I mean, look, it's just, you know, I've had a tight bond with these guys, you know, and so, but you've really, you're just brilliant, man. I appreciate what you're doing. I hope people go check that out. Also check out your website, because there's some articles in there that blew my mind. In fact, before you and I really connected, it was the one about comparing the Theoxany myth of Abraham and the Sodom and Gomorrah story and that of Philemon and Bacchus in Ovid's Metamorphosis that blew me away. And I did a video on that a long time ago before you and I started collabing and stuff. And that was what put you on my radar. I was like, man, this guy sees it. Like he's in there. So I hope people will go support you and check out what you're doing, man. Thank you for your time, bro. Yeah. Any final words from you?
Nope.
I have some final words. Never forget, ladies and gentlemen, like, subscribe, share, comment.
Do the algorithm thing.
That's all free. That is a free way to help grow a channel that you appreciate, the knowledge you want to see out there. Get these ideas going. Look, Bakken, for example, is out here really trying to figure stuff out. He's trying to put the connections together. I also plan on having him on some streams with us too while we go to do live streams. If you're into this stuff, please help us by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. It's free. That's it. And never forget, we are MythVision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.